The earliest indications of what would evolve into Druidic tradition arise from the archaeological findings of Iron Age Europe, echoing like whispers from a distant past. These traces are discovered deep within the ceremonial offerings of sacred springs, buried beneath the earthworks of hill forts, and within the meticulously arranged stone circles scattered throughout the ancient terrain. These discoveries provide evidence of complex religious customs that precede any written records of the Druids themselves by centuries. In northern France, at Gour SA, excavations have uncovered a rectangular enclosure dating back to the 3rd century BC. Enclosed by a wooden palisade, this area seemingly housed a sacred grove. Archaeologists exploring this site have unearthed thousands of weapons such as swords, spearheads and shields, intentionally bent and broken before being ritually deposited in carefully excavated pits. These items were not remnants of battles, but rather ritualistic offerings, their destruction ensuring they were solely dedicated to the deities. The methodical arrangement of these offerings, the precise placement, and the evident ceremonial protocols involved point towards the existence of an organized priestly caste overseeing these intricate rituals. Similar practices are observed across the Celtic territories. For instance, at Ribon-Suron, also in northern France, excavations revealed a vast ossuary containing the remains of more than 1,000 individuals. Their bones were intricately arranged in geometric formations, with skulls separated from bodies and placed in specific locations, while long bones were methodically sorted and stacked with mathematical accuracy. This was not random mutilation, but rather a meticulously choreographed ceremonial practice that demanded a deep understanding of anatomy and religious authority to orchestrate such elaborate posthumous rites. The sacred springs in Britain and Gaul present some of the most compelling evidence for proto-Druidic customs. At the revered springs of Bath dedicated to the goddess Sulis, numerous curse tablets inscribed on delicate sheets of lead have been retrieved from the waters. While the Roman period is commonly cited as the starting point, the practice itself predates the arrival of the Romans. Scholars refer to these depictions as requiring not just literacy, but also a profound understanding of the precise formulaic language needed to invoke divine intervention. The intricate legal and religious terminology used suggests the presence of a scholarly class of religious experts who are well versed in both divine laws and human jurisprudence. On the other side of the channel, at the origin of the river, similar offerings highlight the complexity of pre-Roman Celtic religious rituals. Over the course of centuries, wooden sculptures, anatomical votives symbolizing healed parts of the body, and bronze figurines were carefully placed in sacred waters. The consistent artistic style and religious symbols of these offerings point towards well-established traditions passed down through generations of religious practitioners who upheld both artistic integrity and theological beliefs. The establishment of key ceremonial sites offers further proof of an organized religious authority in pre-Roman Celtic society. For instance, the Hohenberg Hill Fort in southwestern Germany, in use from the 7th to 5th centuries BC, featured elaborate ritual structures built using architectural techniques from the Mediterranean. These were not simple shrines, but rather complex religious compounds that demanded extensive planning, specialized expertise, and the coordination of labor. The presence of luxury goods imported into these settings, such as Greek pottery, Etruscan bronzes, and Baltic amber, indicates the considerable economic resources at the disposal of religious authorities and the extensive trade networks they managed. The Indo-European roots that underlie Celtic religious practices offer valuable insights into the origins of Druidism. Comparative analysis of mythologies reveals noteworthy parallels between Celtic religious beliefs and those observed across the broader Indo-European cultural sphere. The tripartite societal structure found in Celtic culture, consisting of priests, warriors, and producers, resembles similar divisions seen in ancient India, Iran, and Rome. This alignment is not merely coincidental, but rather reflects shared ancestral traditions that were carried by Indo-European-speaking populations across Eurasia during the 3rd and 2nd millennia BC. The fundamental concept of sacred kingship in later Celtic political and religious systems has clear Indo-European origins. Like their counterparts in Vedic India and ancient Iran, Celtic rulers were tasked with upholding cosmic order through proper ritual observance. The king's connection to the land was understood in sacred terms, with his ritual purity and accurate execution of seasonal ceremonies directly impacting agricultural fertility and tribal well-being. This religious aspect of kingship necessitated specialized knowledge of seasonal timing and ritual procedures, which could only be provided by trained religious experts. The Indo-European legacy also encompassed sophisticated notions of cosmic organization that would come to define Celtic religious beliefs. The symbolism of the world tree linking realms of gods, humans, and the deceased is present in Celtic mythology, akin to its appearance in Germanic, Baltic, and Indanian traditions. The trifold cosmic division into the upper world of deities, the middle world of humans, and the underworld of the deceased formed the foundational framework for Celtic religious geography. Rather than mere adoptions, these concepts embodied ancient shared principles that each Indo-European culture interpreted based on local circumstances and historical backgrounds. The emergence of a distinct Celtic culture throughout Europe between 1200 and 500 BC established the particular historical backdrop within which Druidic practices would take shape. The Hallstatt culture, originating in the salt mining areas of Austria, played a central role in this development. The emergence of Celtic material culture can be traced back to around 800 BC, the prosperity stemming from salt trade, a vital commodity for food preservation, and consequently, political influence, facilitated the rise of a warrior elite class, supported by specialized artisans and religious experts. Around 450 BC, the Latin culture marked the pinnacle of Celtic civilization. Named after a sacred site by Lake Neuchâtel in Switzerland, where numerous weapons and ornaments were ceremoniously placed in the water, the Latin culture quickly spread throughout Europe from Ireland to Turkey. The distinct artistic style of this era, characterized by flowing linear designs, stylized animal motifs, and intricate geometric patterns, served not only as decorative elements but also conveyed religious symbolism that demanded skilled interpreters and artists for accurate reproduction. The expansion of Celtic culture was not solely driven by military conquest, but also involved the dissemination of religious and legal practices that necessitated educated specialists for preservation. As Celtic tribes settled across Europe, they brought with them not just tangible artifacts but also rich, oral traditions encompassing genealogies, legal codes, religious rites, and mythological tales. The safeguarding and passing down of this extensive body of knowledge required dedicated experts capable of memorizing vast amounts of information and adapting traditional teachings to suit local contexts. Linguistic study of Celtic languages illustrates the antiquity and complexity of religious terminology, predating written records by centuries. The term Druid originates from the Proto-Celtic compound Druids, merging Dru, oak, with wids, knowing. This composite term alludes not only to oak knowledge but to individuals possessing the gift of perceiving sacred wisdom through natural phenomena. Such linguistic structures are echoed in other Indo-European languages where spiritual practitioners are distinguished by their capacity to discern hidden truths. The Celtic term vatis, as preserved in Irish faith and Welsh Gŵd, referred to a religious specialist tasked with prophecy and poetic inspiration. Etymologically linked to Latin vates and Germanic words for prophetic speech, this indicates ancient Indo-European beliefs in divinely inspired speech. The presence of these terms across various Celtic languages, despite geographical separation, implies they denoted established religious roles passed down through oral tradition over many centuries. The terminology related to sacred geography uncovers intricate concepts of ritual space, that demanded specialized understanding for appropriate navigation. The Celtic term Neaton, signifying a sacred grove or sanctuary, found in place names spanning from Duneton in Asia Minor to Verumamitum in Britain, did not merely indicate wooded areas, but rather carefully demarcated ritual spaces with specific protocols for entrance, conduct, and ceremonial practices. The consistency of terminology over vast distances hints at uniform religious ideas transmitted via networks of trained practitioners. The legal vocabulary preserved in early Irish and Welsh legal texts showcases the nuanced nature of pre-Christian Celtic jurisprudence. Technical terms for different contract types, property rights, and legal procedures exhibit striking resemblance to legal concepts in other Indo-European traditions, underlining the rigorous training required by legal specialists who fused legal expertise with religious influence. The utilization of seasonal and calendar terminology underscores the fusion of sophisticated astronomical insights with religious customs. The Gaulish calendar, dating back to the 1st century BC in France, represents the apex of Celtic astronomical study, with its intricate intercalation system aligning lunar months with the solar year, necessitating mathematical prowess and observational acumen possessed by dedicated experts. The religious terminology integrated within the calendar to designate auspicious and inauspicious periods, seasonal ceremonies, and divine festivals showcases the fusion of astronomical knowledge with religious customs. The preservation of mythological narratives in Celtic languages reveals intricate theological concepts that necessitated specialized training to uphold and interpret. The intricate genealogies linking divine and human lineages, the complex relationships between tribal deities and territorial boundaries, and the detailed protocols governing interactions between the human and divine realms all required extensive memorization and a profound comprehension of traditional teachings. The shift from archaeological deductions to documented historical reality occurs significantly with Julius Caesar's 58 BC arrival in Gaul. This marks the first time in recorded history that we encounter detailed written depictions of the Druids from an external observer who purported direct engagement with these enigmatic figures. Caesar's commentary De Bello Gallico, penned between 58 and 50 BC, presents the most comprehensive classical portrayal of Druidic society. While Caesar's account must be scrutinized through the lens of Roman political and military motives, his depiction of the Druidic hierarchy exposes a sophisticated religious structure that influenced key aspects of Celtic society. According to his narrative, the Druids constituted a distinct social class exempt from military conscription and taxation, privileges that positioned them above even the warrior noble class in certain aspects. At the pinnacle of this hierarchy resided a chief Druid vested with supreme authority over all religious affairs throughout Gaul. This position was either inherited through succession or more commonly elected by the Druidic assembly following the predecessor's passing. Caesar's description of the electoral process implies a democratic facet within the Druidic organization, contrasting starkly with the autocratic systems typically encountered by the Romans. When several contenders vied for the position of chief Druid, the choice was determined by a vote among the gathered Druids. If this method proved inconclusive in selecting a definite victor, the situation could escalate to armed conflict, indicating that Druids, despite their religious standing, were prepared to resort to violence to settle disputes over succession. This detail highlights the significant political power associated with leadership roles within Druidic society. Caesar's documentation of Druidic education offers fascinating insights into Celtic intellectual culture. He recounts that the training of Druids entailed an intensive 20-year period of study, during which students memorized extensive oral tradition without recording any of it in writing. According to Caesar, the prohibition on written documentation served a dual purpose. It safeguarded sacred information from falling into unauthorized hands and reinforced memory through continuous practice. The educational curriculum encompassed natural philosophy, astronomy, theology, and what Caesar termed the immortality of souls and their transmigration after death into other forms. Even Caesar was struck by the extensive reach of Druidic education, noting that students journeyed from various regions of Gaul and Britain to pursue studies at specific centres of learning. He posits that Britain was the ancestral homeland of Druidic tradition, implying that the most advanced teachings were exclusively available there. If this assertion holds true, it suggests that despite the political disunity among Celtic tribes, intellectual and religious networks maintained connections spanning vast distances and tribal boundaries. Caesar's account of the judicial functions of the Druids illustrates their role as mediators in both religious and secular conflicts. The Druids were entrusted to preside as judges in legal disputes involving murder, inheritance, and boundary conflicts. Their rulings carried authoritative weight supported by the issuance of religious penalties. The most severe punishment they could administer was exclusion from sacred ceremonies, effectively isolating the offender from societal interactions. Caesar noted that those subjected to this punishment faced pervasive ostracism within their community, being prohibited from participating in religious practices and seeking legal redress. The annual congregation of Druids at a sacred locale within the Carnutes tribe's territory exemplifies the cohesive institutional framework underpinning Celtic religious governance. Caesar depicted this gathering as held at what the Druids regarded as the heart of Gaul, where representatives from various Celtic regions congregated to arbitrate disputes and harmonize religious doctrines. The mutual respect shown by conflicting tribes towards this assembly underscores the overarching authority wielded by Druids that transcended political divides. Caesar's narrative of Druidic practices involving human sacrifices remains one of the most contentious topics in classical accounts. He detailed diverse methods of ritualistic killing, including the creation of colossal wicker structures filled with living sacrifices and engulfed in flames. While these depictions have captivated common imagination, they require meticulous scrutiny given Caesar's political motives and Roman perspectives on non-Roman religious rituals. Romans often accused foreign cultures of conducting human sacrifices as a pretext for military interventions and cultural assimilation. Archaeological findings from Celtic archaeological sites do validate instances of ritualistic human sacrifices in specific contexts. However, the scope and systematic portrayal articulated by Caesar may reflect Roman propagandistic tendencies rather than precise observations. Notably, preserved bog bodies discovered across northern Europe offer tangible evidence of such rituals, demonstrating that human sacrifice was conducted within Celtic religious practices. These isolated findings do not strongly corroborate Caesar's assertions of widespread routine mass sacrifices. Pliny the Elder's Natural History, completed around 77 to 79 AD, offers an alternate perspective on Druidic customs, emphasizing their connection to the natural world. Writing a century post-Caesar, Pliny benefits from additional sources, enabling him to witness remnants of Druidic traditions that endured despite Roman suppression attempts. His narrative underscores the botanical and medicinal knowledge integral to Druidic expertise. Flynn's detailed depiction of the mistletoe ritual stands as one of the most elaborate accounts in classical literature. According to Pliny, Druids revered mistletoe as sacred only when it grew on oak trees, an uncommon phenomenon that rendered such specimens remarkably valuable. The harvest ritual, executed solely on the 6th day of the lunar month, featured a golden sickle wielded by a white-robed druid ascending the tree, while other participants stood below with a white cloth to catch the falling plant. Pliny's delineation of the ritual prerequisites exposes the precision and formalities characteristic of Druidic ceremonial practices. 2 white balls were sacrificed during the ceremony, and the gathered mistletoe was shared among attendees who believed it conferred protection against toxins and heightened fertility in livestock. The stipulated temporal criterion of the 6th day of the lunar month illustrates the intricate fusion of astronomical knowledge and religious customs. Pliny's depiction of sacred groves offers insights into Celtic notions of consecrated spaces, corroborated by archaeological findings. These groves were depicted as meticulously preserved ritual sites where specific trees were revered as abodes of specific deities. The Druids fulfilled the role of safeguarding these locations, ensuring adherence to proper procedures and preventing unauthorized individuals from disrupting the sanctity of the area. Excavations conducted at sites such as Gezu Aronda have substantiated the existence of meticulously delineated ceremonial spaces that were meticulously maintained over time and utilized for repeated ritual purposes. The attribution of botanical knowledge to the Druids by Ply underscores their genuine expertise in herbal medicine and natural philosophy. Ply catalogued plants that the Druids deemed sacred, providing detailed accounts of their perceived properties and ritual uses. While some of these assertions exhibit elements of magical belief rather than empirical observation, others reveal a precise understanding of plant characteristics that has been validated by modern pharmacological understanding. The methodical nature of this botanical wisdom hints at structured educational practices that transmitted comprehensive insights into plant recognition, preparation techniques, and medicinal applications. In his exposition of Druidic astronomy, Pliny uncovers the Druids' advanced observational skills, enabling them to create precise calendars and make seasonal forecasts. He portrays the Druids as adept at predicting eclipses, determining optimal timings for agricultural endeavors, and identifying favorable periods for various activities. This depth of astronomical knowledge necessitated generations of meticulous observation and mathematical computation, corroborating Caesar's assertions regarding the extensive educational regimen required for Druidic instruction. Tacitus presents gripping and politically charged narratives of Druidic endeavors in his Annals and Agricola from the early 2nd century AD. His accounts predominantly concentrate on the climactic clash between Roman supremacy and Druidic opposition in Britain, notably the siege of the Isle of Mona in 60 AD commanded by Suetonius Paulinus. Tacitus's depiction of the Mona campaign vividly portrays the final bastion of British Druidism, describing the island as heavily fortified and acting as a haven for insurgents from various regions of the British Isles seeking sanctuary under Druidic guardianship. The Roman invasion of the island was made more complex by the challenge of moving troops across the perilous waters of the Menai Strait, where strong tidal currents and shallow sections posed dangers to naval operations. Tacitus vividly depicts how the British defense of Mona deeply affected the morale of Roman soldiers. He portrays a scene where armed warriors stood alongside Druids who, with arms raised to the sky, placed curses upon the Roman forces. Mourning-clad women darted amidst the defenders like vengeful spirits, brandishing torches that heightened the eerie ambience, causing the Roman advance to falter initially. Swathed in white robes, the Druids themselves made a striking presence with their gestures and appearance, causing even battle-hardened Roman veterans to hesitate in their forward movement. Tacitus documents that Suetonius had to personally rally his troops to overcome their superstitious apprehensions and advance against what he branded as a savage form of superstition. The subsequent Roman assault proved to be devastating, overwhelming the defenders. The sacred groves were felled and the altars were desecrated. Tacitus explicitly notes the Romans' discovery of signs of human sacrifice, such as altars drenched in human blood and groves where victims met their demise. The annihilation of Mona represented more than just a military triumph. It was a purposeful strike against the foundational structure of British opposition to Roman hegemony. Tacitus underscores that the Romans acknowledged the Druids' pivotal role in organizing resistance to their rule and considered eradicating their power base crucial to solidifying control over Britain. The synchronized attack with Boudicca's uprising in eastern Britain underscores the Roman grasp of the link between Druidic authority and coordinated defiance against Roman dominance. Tacitus's broader examination of Druids in his historical accounts unveils their enduring impact even following official suppression. He cites their involvement in Sevilla's 6970 AD revolt, noting how Druidic prophecies emboldened Germanic and Kiech tribes to anticipate a shift in global dominance following the burning of Rome. This episode illustrates the lingering Druid influence decades after Caesar's conquest of Gaul, persistently challenging Roman authority. An in-depth analysis of these classical sources necessitates thoughtful reflection on the cultural prejudices and political motivations that influenced Roman narratives. Roman writers tailored their accounts for Roman readers, weaving perceptions of foreign peoples and their religious customs within the fabric of Roman cultural norms and strategic goals. The accusation of human sacrifice is consistently mentioned in Roman accounts of various non-Roman peoples ranging from Carthaginians to Germans to Celts. While archaeological findings support the occurrence of ritual human sacrifice in Celtic contexts, the detailed and widespread nature depicted by Roman writers likely stems from literary conventions rather than precise reporting. Roman authors strategically used allegations of human sacrifice to justify military actions and cultural dominance, blurring the line between factual evidence and propaganda. By highlighting the secrecy of Druids and their reluctance to document teachings, Romans aimed to depict Druids as enigmatic and potentially rebellious, aligning with their rhetorical objectives. Romans, who esteemed written laws and public debate, often viewed the reliance of Druids on oral traditions as primitive or intentionally duplicitous. Nevertheless, the advanced legal and astronomical knowledge found in later Irish and Welsh records implies that the choice for oral transmission was deliberate rather than a lack of ability to develop written systems. The political underpinnings of Roman narratives are evident in their portrayal of Druidic resistance to Roman rule. Roman accounts consistently depict Druids as the central figures in anti-Roman sentiments, suggesting that eradicating Druidic influence was crucial for successful conquest. While this portrayal may hold some truth, it also served to vindicate severe suppression tactics and redirect attention from legitimate grievances fueling Celtic opposition to Roman governance. Critical evaluation is necessary when considering the geographical assertions and classical sources. Julius Caesar's claim that Druidism originated in Britain and then spread to Gaul could reflect genuine historical tradition, but it could also have been aligned with his political objectives by implying that the conquest of Britain was necessary to eradicate Druidic influence entirely. The unity of Druidic organization across different tribal boundaries may be exaggerated in classical sources to enhance dramatic effect, possibly not accurately reflecting the level of coordination among Celtic religious specialists. Despite this, classical texts offer valuable insights into Druidic practices and social structure that cannot be gleaned from archaeological findings alone. Descriptions of educational methods, judicial roles, and ceremonial practices provide a glimpse into Celtic intellectual culture, complementing physical evidence uncovered in excavations. Consistent details found in various classical accounts over different periods suggest some elements are based on direct observation rather than literary conventions. By combining classical sources with archaeological data and later Celtic literary traditions, a more nuanced understanding of Druidic society emerges than any individual source could present. Although Roman authors had biases that influenced their narratives, their first-hand interactions with Celtic society during the conquest era yield contemporary insights into Druidic organization and customs when analyzed critically. Celtic territories' physical landscapes went beyond being mere backdrops for Druidic activities. They were intricately organized sacred spaces where natural features held specific religious meanings and served ritual purposes. Archaeological studies across Europe reveal systematic layouts in how Celtic communities structured their religious areas, establishing networks of sacred sites that linked local tribal lands with broader regional and pan-Celtic religious beliefs. The recognition of near or sacred groves represents a significant advancement in understanding Celtic religious geography, as these meticulously tended woodland sanctuaries are found throughout the archaeological record from Scotland to Asia Minor, distinguished by unique artifact collections and structural remains, setting them apart from regular settlements or burial grounds. At Ceremonies in northern France, excavations uncovered a rectangular enclosure measuring about 45-38 meters, enclosed by a wooden palisade with a single east-facing entrance. Within this demarcated area, archaeologists found traces of continuous ritual practices spanning more than 2 centuries from the 3rd century BC to the Roman conquest era. The site exemplifies the sophisticated organization of Neaton spaces. The central region featured a wooden temple structure constructed following specific architectural principles that remained consistent through multiple refurbishment phases. Surrounding this temple, meticulously arranged pits housed thousands of deliberately damaged weapons, including iron swords, spearheads, shields, and helmets. The methodical nature of this destruction, characterized by particular bending and breaking patterns, suggests well-established ritual procedures that demanded specialized expertise for proper execution. Comparable Namidan sites throughout Celtic Europe showcase standardized methods of sacred space arrangement despite significant geographical distances. In Mirabos Bez in Burgundy, a square enclosure dated back to the 2nd century BC harbored a central wooden structure encircled by pits filled with animal bones, pottery shards, and metal artifacts. The bone collections exhibit signs of systematic butchery and distribution, hinting at communal feasting activities necessitating coordination by religious experts familiar with proper ceremonial protocols. The River Montsouranais site in Picod presents notably compelling evidence of the scale and complexity of Neaton activities. This sanctuary, active from the 3rd to 1st centuries BC, contained a sizable ossuary, where human remains were meticulously arranged following strict anatomical guidelines. Skulls were segregated from postcranial elements and placed in distinct zones, while long bones were grouped by type and stacked in geometric arrangements. The meticulous organization of human remains underscored the need for profound anatomical knowledge and religious authority to oversee such elaborate post-mortem rites. Archaeological investigation of the British Netta site uncovered organizational principles adapted to local geographic conditions. The Hayling Island Sanctuary in Hampshire, active from the 1st century BC through the Roman period, was situated on a hilltop overlooking the Solent. The sanctuary featured a circular wooden temple within a square enclosure where evidence of metalwork deposition, animal sacrifices, and votive offerings spanning several centuries was found. The consistency in ritual deposits and architectural features across different building phases suggests continuous maintenance by specialized religious practitioners. Stone circles played a significant role in Celtic sacred geography, with their historical connection to Druidic practices presenting complexities due to their construction predating recognizable Celtic culture. Although most British and Irish stone circles were built during the Neolithic and Bronze Age periods, centuries before the prominence of Celtic culture, ongoing archaeological investigations indicate that these ancient monuments were utilized and modified during the Iron Age. This suggests that Druids integrated pre-existing sacred sites into their religious rituals. Stonehenge stands out as a well-studied example of this phenomenon. While its initial construction dates back to the 3rd millennium BC, archaeological findings point to substantial Iron Age activities at the site. Excavations have revealed Celtic artifacts, metalwork, and human remains dated to the era of documented Druidic practices in Britain. The presence of cremated human remains, some from the Iron Age, in the Aubrey holes at Stonehenge, suggests that Druids may have utilized the ancient monument for burial ceremonies linked to their religious beliefs. Similar patterns of Iron Age reuse of earlier monuments are also observed at the Rollright Stones site in Oxfordshire. Throughout the Celtic period, this Bronze Age stone circle displayed ongoing ritual activity, evidenced by the deposition of metalwork and the modification of individual stones. Local place names indicate that the site retained religious importance into the medieval period, demonstrating the enduring sacred connections through various cultural shifts. Across Celtic territories, burial mounds and barrows reveal intricate landscape organization that linked the community with ancestral spirits and territorial limits. An example is the Hawkdorf burial in southwestern Germany dating back to the 6th century BC, showcasing how individual burials were integrated into broader sacred landscapes. A significant cumulus exceeding 60 meters in diameter was strategically positioned to be visible from nearby settlements and aligned with important astronomical occurrences. For instance, the Vix burial in Burgundy, holding the remains of a high-status woman accompanied by remarkable grave goods like a massive bronze crater, illustrates how elite burials served as focal points for territorial structuring. Strategically located burial mounds offered extensive views of the landscape, while their proximity to the Mont-Lassuy hill fort suggests connections with political and religious centers of authority. Earlier traditions, notably evident in Irish passage tombs like New Grangnath and Dow in the Boy Valley, were integrated into Celtic communities' religious beliefs and practices. Although these monuments date back to the Neolithic era, medieval Irish texts refer to them as Sid, or fairy mounds associated with supernatural beings. The enduring significance of these sites in Irish folklore suggests that Druids maintained ties with ancient sacred locations, adapting earlier religious beliefs to fit within Celtic theological frameworks. The approach of the ritual landscape to Celtic sacred geography illustrates how individual sites operated as elements of interconnected religious systems rather than isolated sanctuaries. Within the Trier region of Germany, archaeological research has identified groupings of Celtic temples, burial mounds, and votive offerings arranged according to specific spatial configurations. These complex sites were linked by ancient pathways that facilitated movement between various ritual locations during seasonal rites or religious celebrations. Water worship played a crucial role in Celtic religious observance, with springs, wells, and rivers serving as vital connections between the human and divine realms. The healing springs at Bath, dedicated to the goddess Sulis, present remarkable evidence of the intricate nature of Celtic water cults. The natural thermal springs, maintaining a constant temperature of 46 degrees C, were transformed into an intricate sanctuary complex that drew visitors from throughout Roman Britain and beyond. Excavations at Bath have uncovered over 12,000 Roman coins tossed into the sacred spring as votive offerings, along with pewter vessels, jewelry, and gemstones. Of particular significance, the site has yielded around 130 curse tablets inscribed on thin sheets of lead and placed in the spring waters. These curse tablets, inscribed in Latin but adhering to Celtic legal and religious conventions, highlight the continuity of indigenous religious practices within the Roman cultural milieu. The curse tablets reveal a sophisticated grasp of divine law and the correct protocols for seeking divine intervention in human conflicts. Typically commencing with invocations to Sulis Minerva, blending the Celtic goddess with her Roman equivalent, these tablets then detail alleged transgressions and specify desired retribution. The specialized knowledge required to interpret the legal terminology and formulaic language in these texts was exclusive to religious specialists well versed in both Celtic and Roman legal traditions. The prevalence of water sanctuaries across Celtic Europe highlights the significance of spring and river worship in Celtic religious observances. At the origin of the Seine in Burgundy, the sanctuary of Sawana has accumulated thousands of votive offerings over numerous centuries. Wooden sculptures depicting healed body parts, bronze figurines representing pilgrims, and miniature models of internal organs indicate that this site functioned as a healing sanctuary where individuals sought divine assistance for medical ailments. The Fonte Sequi site reveals the structured nature of Celtic pilgrimage rituals, with votive deposits reflecting systematic creation by specialized artisans who crafted standardized offerings for various types of seekers. Anatomical votives were sculpted following established artistic norms, while bronze figurines adhered to consistent iconographic designs that demanded skilled execution. This uniformity implies supervision by religious experts who upheld artistic and theological standards over prolonged periods. River deposits throughout Celtic regions offer further insight into water-focused ceremonial practices. Notably, the Ten has produced significant quantities of high-quality metalwork from the Iron Age era. Weapons, tools, ornaments, and cauldrons were ritually discarded into the river at specific sites, often near fords or confluences of special geographic importance. The clustering of these offerings at specific locations indicates well-established ritual sites where ceremonies were conducted according to defined procedures. The Batisi shield, recovered from the Tempames and dated to the 1st century BC, exemplifies the exceptional craftsmanship seen in river sanctuaries. Adorned with intricate Latini artistic motifs and originally embellished with glass studs, this bronze shield was evidently a prestige item rather than a utilitarian military piece. Deposition of offerings in the Tempames required authorization by religious authorities with the ability to determine suitable offerings for water deities, signifying a significant sacrifice. The presence of sacred wells across the Celtic world showcases the enduring nature of water worship traditions from ancient times through the medieval era. On Hadrian's Wall, the Carabothum feature included a sacred well where Roman soldiers made offerings to Celtic water deities alongside their allegiance to Mithras. Discoveries of altars dedicated to local nymphs and water spirits at the site indicate the continuation of native religious customs within Roman military setting. Irish holy wells provide substantial evidence of Celtic water worship traditions that persisted even after the introduction of Christianity. Medieval texts detail intricate ceremonies performed at sacred springs, involving specific rituals such as directional circuits, offerings placed in the water, and healing practices carried out by specialized individuals. The enduring presence of these traditions into modern times suggests deeply ingrained practices originating in pre-Christian Celtic religious beliefs. Once known as Anglesey but currently recognized as the island of Mona, this land held a paramount position within the sacred landscape of Celtic Britain. Classical accounts consistently portray Mona as the primary center for Druidic education and religious significance, a notion supported by archaeological findings of extensive ritual activities spanning many centuries. Situated apart from mainland Wales by the challenging waters of the Menai Strait, Mona's geographical location offered natural protection that facilitated the development of significant religious institutions without external political interference. Tacitus's narrative of the Roman attack on Mona in 60 AD portrays the island as heavily fortified and serving as a sanctuary for rebels from various parts of Britain seeking safety under the guardianship of the Druids. The Roman leader Suetonius Paulinus understood that eradicating Druidic influence necessitated dismantling their institutional foundation on Mona, thus making the conquest of the island a crucial strategic objective. Despite facing military obstacles in executing an amphibious assault through hazardous tidal waters, archaeological findings on Anglesey have unveiled substantial evidence of Iron Age religious practices, corroborating classical assertions regarding the island's significance. The Lyn Carrick Bach deposit, unearthed during the construction of an RAF airfield in 1942, contained more than 150 metal objects deposited in a lake over a span of around 150 years during the 1st and 2nd centuries BC. Within this collection are weapons, vehicle fixtures, slave restraints, cauldrons, and currency bars symbolizing offerings sourced from regions across Britain and Ireland. The distribution of artifacts in the Lyn Cerrig deposit underscores Mona's pivotal role as a hub for pan-British religious activities. Weapons exhibit stylistic influences from Scotland, Northern England, and Ireland, while vehicle fixtures showcase artistic motifs typical of continental Celtic metalworking traditions. This diversity implies that the site attracted contributions from communities spanning the Celtic regions, lending support to the classical assertions regarding Mona's paramount religious significance. The discovery of slave restraints at Lyn Cerrig offers unsettling proof of the human toll of Celtic religious customs. These iron shackles, designed to secure multiple individuals in interconnected groupings, were submerged in the lake as votive offerings alongside other valuable metal items. Their presence within a religious context suggests that human trafficking and slavery were integral parts of the economic infrastructure supporting major Celtic sanctuaries. Additional archaeological sites on Anglesey further reveal the depth of Iron Age practices. Religious practices carried out throughout the island are exemplified by the Brynelly Ddu passage tomb, which was first built during the Neolithic era and exhibits signs of ongoing use and alterations during the Iron Age. Within the site were found cremated human remains, pottery, and metal artifacts dating back to the Celtic period, suggesting the integration of ancient burial structures into current religious customs. The Dinleagy Hut group, situated on Anglesey, presents evidence of specialized religious communities associated with potential Druidic training institutions. This settlement from the late Iron Age features circular stone structures arranged within a defensive enclosure, showcasing activities such as metalwork, fine pottery production, and the consumption of high-status foods. The strategic location, architectural complexity, and artifact collection of the site indicate that it was likely occupied by religious experts rather than typical farming communities. Anglesey's Holyhead Mountain hosts abundant evidence of Iron Age ceremonial practices, including stone circles, burial sites, and settlements spanning multiple centuries. Perched prominently and visible from the Irish Sea, Holyhead Mountain served as an optimal site for astronomical observations and seasonal rituals. Excavations have revealed numerous stone alignments aligned with celestial events, suggesting a systematic observation of astronomical phenomena conducted by trained specialists. The sacred landscape of Celtic regions demonstrates a sophisticated understanding of organizing the environment, combining natural elements with human-built ceremonial areas. This intricate system required meticulous oversight by religious specialists familiar with suitable site locations, ceremonial practices, and seasonal timing for various religious activities. Archaeological findings indicate that Druids played a pivotal role in structuring and preserving the intricate sacred landscape throughout the Celtic realm. The institutional hierarchy governing Celtic religious and intellectual life reveals a complex system surpassing the typical priest-warrior-farmer divisions prevalent in other Indo-European societies. Combining archaeological discoveries with classical sources and later Celtic literary accounts unveils that Druidic institutions comprised three interconnected orders, each fulfilling specialized roles, educational criteria, and social duties that collectively preserved the multifaceted tapestry of Celtic civilization. At the pinnacle of this framework were the primary Druids, responsible for judicial matters, advanced learning, and mediation between tribal factions. These individuals held significant influence over Celtic society, acting as ultimate judges in legal disputes spanning from land disputes to accusations of violence. Their judicial reach extended beyond tribal allegiances, enabling them to settle disagreements between various Celtic groups and maintain legal coherence across widespread populations. The consistent legal terminology found in early Irish and Welsh legal documents reflects the efficacy of this system in conveying intricate legal concepts over vast distances and prolonged periods. The instructional duties of the principal Druids included educating the upcoming generation of religious experts in the most sophisticated facets of Celtic intellectual heritage. This education encompassed natural philosophy, astronomy, theology, and the detailed legal principles that governed Celtic life. Aspiring students seeking entry to this advanced level of Druidic education typically underwent extensive preparatory training in memory techniques, core legal tenets, and fundamental religious beliefs. Caesar's description of a 20-year educational period likely indicates the time needed to attain full Druidic standing, commencing with primary education and culminating in expertise in the most obscure teachings. Archaeological findings from locations like the Hawkdorf burial and the Vix tomb reveal the substantial material wealth and social standing associated with the upper echelons of Druidic leadership. The valuable items buried with these elites, sourced from various regions in Europe and the Mediterranean, suggest that senior Druids oversaw extensive trade networks and accumulated considerable economic assets. The presence of specialized craftsmanship, such as intricate metalworking and exotic materials, implies that Druidic institutions supported communities of skilled artisans responsible for crafting ceremonial items essential for religious practices. The second tier of the Druidic hierarchy comprised bards who specialized in preserving and reciting historical narratives, genealogical records, and poetic compositions. These works encoded legal and religious knowledge in memorable artistic forms, serving as primary repositories of Celtic cultural memory. Bards maintained vast collections of oral literature, safeguarding tribal histories, mythological traditions, and legal precedents across generations. Their training focused on verbal artistry, musical composition, and intricate metrical systems to facilitate the accurate memorization of complex narrative sequences. Mastery of various poetic forms suited for different social contexts and communicative purposes was central to their education. Praise poetry lauding warriors and rulers necessitated deep knowledge of military tactics, genealogy, and notable deeds. Satirical compositions, believed to possess supernatural power in Celtic tradition, required an understanding of social dynamics and political tensions for effective critique. Legal poetry employed metrical frameworks to encode juristic principles, ensuring precise transmission of technical terminology over oral traditions. Beyond entertainment, bards played crucial roles in political validation and social unity, verifying rulers' legitimate claims through genealogical knowledge, tracing royal lineages to divine ancestors. During succession conflicts, bards' testimony on bloodline connections often decided political outcomes, essential to Celtic power structures. Their presence in royal courts provided both ceremonial endorsement and practical counsel grounded in historical precedent and traditional wisdom. Archaeological evidence supporting BIC activities manifests through the unearthing of distinctive musical instruments and performance venues at prestigious Celtic sites. For instance, the Deskford Carnix, a bronze war trumpet adorned with intricate boar-head embellishments, exemplifies the advanced musical technology accessible to Celtic artists. The discovery of analogous instruments across Celtic regions showcases uniform manufacturing methods and ornamental patterns, suggesting coordinated production by specialized artisans adhering to established artistic conventions. Within Celtic settlements, performance spaces exhibit features attesting to acoustic considerations and audience arrangements conducive to bardic presentations. Amphitheater-like configurations identified at certain elevated sites benefited from natural acoustics, allowing lone performers to address large audiences without artificial amplification. The strategic placement of these venues within settlement layouts implies their integral role in the routine social gatherings of Celtic communities, indicating that BIC performances were common occurrences rather than restricted to special events. The third tier of the Druidic hierarchy consisted of the Vates, individuals endowed with specialized expertise encompassing divination, healing practices, and the interpretation of natural omens. guiding both personal choices and communal policies. These individuals possessed extensive knowledge of herbal medicine, surgical methods, and astronomical observations used to determine auspicious timings for various activities. Their medical insight blended empirical observations of plant properties with theoretical frameworks rooted in Celtic notions of cosmic balance and divine intervention in human matters. The divinatory rituals practiced by the Vates encompassed a variety of techniques for soliciting supernatural insight concerning forthcoming events and suitable courses of action. Historical accounts describe diverse methods such as observing bird flight patterns, interpreting the innards of animals and casting marked wooden lots representing symbolic imagery. Excavations yielding divination tools, including sets of marked bones and specialized vessels for ritual casting, corroborate the material artifacts associated with these traditions. Healing sanctuaries dispersed across Celtic territories offer substantial archaeological evidence supporting these practices. The medical knowledge and therapeutic practices upheld by the Vates included detailed anatomical votive offerings at the sanctuary of Sawana, located at the source of the Seine. These representations depicted specific body parts that pilgrims sought healing for through divine intervention. The precision of these anatomical representations reveals a profound understanding of human anatomy acquired through systematic study and practical experience with medical conditions. Wooden sculptures found at Sawana featured depictions of internal organs, limbs afflicted by specific diseases, and complete human figures displaying various pathological conditions. The intricate nature of these carvings indicates that Celtic medical practitioners possessed a sophisticated comprehension of human anatomy and pathology, allowing for precise diagnosis and targeted treatment of particular ailments. The use of standardized artistic conventions within these votives suggests oversight by trained specialists who maintain consistent standards for medical representation. Herbal medicine played a pivotal role in Vatic medical practice, as evidenced by the botanical knowledge preserved in later Celtic literary traditions and supported by archaeological findings of medicinal plants at religious sites. The systematic organization of this knowledge, encompassing comprehensive information on plant identification, preparation methods, and therapeutic applications, demanded extensive training under experienced practitioners familiar with both theoretical principles and practical techniques. The incorporation of astronomical observations into medical practice showcases the sophisticated theoretical foundation underpinning Celtic healing traditions. The coordination of herbal collection, surgical procedures, and therapeutic treatments with celestial observations exemplifies the systematic approach Celtic practitioners adopted in healthcare delivery, integrating empirical medical knowledge with astronomical timing to ensure optimal conditions for various medical interventions. The educational system that prepared individuals for positions within the Druidic hierarchy stands as one of the most remarkable intellectual accomplishments of ancient European civilization. Caesar's account of a 20-year training program describes a journey through progressively specialized tiers of education, commencing with basic memorization methods and foundational religious principles before delving into the most mystical facets of Celtic intellectual heritage. This extensive educational pathway cultivated experts whose expertise spanned disciplines such as law, medicine, astronomy, theology, history, and natural philosophy under cohesive theoretical frameworks. Caesar explains that the prohibition on written records within the Druidic system served multiple purposes. Through mandating students to commit vast amounts of knowledge to memory instead of relying on written documents, the system honed memory skills and ensured that graduates had immediate access to their knowledge without external assistance. The oral transmission of knowledge also enforced strict control over access to specialized information, safeguarding against unauthorized individuals obtaining religious or legal knowledge that could be exploited for personal gain. The memorization techniques utilized in Druidic education were based on intricate mnemonic systems that encoded intricate information within memorable poetic and narrative structures. Legal concepts were intertwined with mythological tales to demonstrate their practical applications, while astronomical data was preserved within seasonal narratives that linked celestial observations to agricultural practices and religious rituals. By combining practical knowledge with memorable artistic expressions, accurate transmission of technical information was achieved across successive generations of oral tradition. The expansive reach of Druidic education established intellectual networks that surpassed political borders and tribal allegiances throughout the Celtic realm. Students journeyed from distant regions to attend prestigious educational institutions, establishing personal ties that facilitated communication and collaboration among geographically dispersed Celtic communities. These educational networks played a key role in upholding consistent legal and religious practices across the vast Celtic settlements stretching from Ireland to Asia Minor. The advanced Druidic curriculum encompassed natural philosophy, probing deep into the fundamental mysteries of the universe, divine forces, and the intricate interplay between human society and cosmic harmony. This education involved meticulous astronomical observations, enabling precise calendar creation, eclipse forecasts, and the identification of optimal timings for various endeavors. The mathematical acumen required for these calculations showcases the refined intellectual capacities nurtured within Druidic educational establishments. Gender roles in Druidic society exhibited intricate configurations that challenge simplistic classification according to modern interpretations of ancient gender norms. While classical sources offer sparse yet noteworthy mentions of female religious practitioners who held sway within Celtic religious structures, archaeological findings indicate women occupying esteemed positions that likely related to religious duties. The assimilation of this evidence with subsequent Celtic literary traditions hints at women partaking in Druidic rituals at various levels of the institutional hierarchy. The Vix burial site in Burgundy stands as a striking archaeological testament to elite women in Celtic society potentially wielding religious authority. The monumental bronze vessel unearthed in this 6th century BC burial, capable of containing over 1,000 litres of liquid, ranks among the largest metallic receptacles from antiquity. The burial's strategic position with expansive views and its vicinity to major hill fort complexes suggest the interred woman wielded significant political and potentially religious influence in her community. Additional female burials scattered across Celtic Europe unveil intriguing burial patterns. The burial practices and goods found at the Rheinheim site in Germany are indicative of specialized roles potentially tied to religious functions. The burial of a woman at this site was accompanied by intricate jewelry, imported luxury items, and specialized tools that might have been used for divination or ceremonial activities. The richness and diversity of these burial offerings suggest that high-status Celtic women were able to amass considerable wealth and social standing through their specific roles. Later Roman texts make reference to female Druids who served as priestesses, prophets, and advisors to political leaders. Tacitus also notes the involvement of women in the defense of Mona alongside male Druids, implying that female religious specialists took part in both political and military aspects of Druidic resistance against Roman rule. These accounts highlight the potential for women to attain positions of religious influence that allowed them to engage in the highest echelons of Celtic political life. Moreover, archaeological findings from healing sanctuaries imply that women potentially had significant roles as medical practitioners within the Vatic tradition. The anatomical offerings discovered at sites like Sawana depict various female reproductive organs and health conditions specific to women, demonstrating a specialized understanding of gynecological medicine likely upheld by female healers. The intricacy and accuracy of these representations suggest a structured study of women's medical issues by experts knowledgeable about female anatomy and reproductive well-being. Irish literary sources further uphold the existence of female religious figures who wielded substantial authority in pre-Christian Celtic society. The depiction of the Bandri or female druid in medieval Irish texts is a common theme, portraying them as influential practitioners of magic, prophecy, and healing. These female figures were credited with the ability to sway the outcomes of battles and political disputes. Despite originating from the medieval era, these texts consistently highlight the presence of female religious authority, hinting at the preservation of ancient beliefs concerning women's roles within Druidic institutions. In Celtic society, the social standing of Druids mirrored their crucial role as intermediaries between human communities and divine forces. They served as arbitrators in legal conflicts and safeguarded cultural customs that fostered social unity among different tribes. Their exemption from military duties and taxes, as observed by Caesar, positioned them above the warrior elite in certain aspects, recognizing their specialized contributions to community well-being. This privileged position allowed Druids to amass wealth, establish extensive educational facilities, and wield political power that transcended tribal boundaries. The advisory bonds between Druids and Celtic rulers fostered intricate dynamics that harmonized royal power with religious supervision of political judgments. Celtic kings and tribal chiefs entrusted Druidic wisdom on legal doctrines, celestial timings, and divine wishes to shape their policies and legitimize their rule. Their reliance on Druidic expertise granted religious experts significant sway over political matters while upholding the nominal supremacy of secular leaders in military and administrative domains. Druids fulfilled diplomatic roles as impartial negotiators in conflicts between rival tribal factions, facilitating peace talks and treaty settlements that might have been obstructed by age-old enmities and territorial disputes. Their religious authority transcended political borders, allowing them to enforce supernatural penalties for treaty breaches and furnish credible assurances for negotiated pacts. The diplomatic role necessitated a deep understanding of legal traditions, genealogical connections, and territorial demarcations, which could only be upheld through structured education and institutional memory. The foundational framework of Celtic religious philosophy was built on a nuanced comprehension of existence, transcending the simplistic dichotomy of life and death commonly found in ancient societies. Archaeological findings from Celtic burial grounds throughout Europe unveil consistent patterns of grave offerings, body arrangements, and tomb structures, reflecting ingrained beliefs in the soul's continuity beyond corporeal passing. The Hochdorf burial in southwestern Germany, dating back to the 6th century BC, illustrates this perspective through intricate preparations made for the departed to embark on an afterlife journey necessitating the same material provisions as earthly life. Within the Hochdorf burial chamber, not only personal possessions, but an entire household's worth of tools were meticulously arranged for functional accessibility. Bronze drinking vessels, food cauldrons, and a four-wheeled wagon placed near the burial shrine imply that the departed individual was anticipated to maintain their social standing and daily routines in the afterlife as they did in life. Traces of food residues in drinking horns and indications of fermented drinks in bronze receptacles suggest that Celtic notions of post-mortem existence included sensory encounters akin to those of the living. The positioning of Celtic burials yields significant clues about beliefs concerning the soul's passage following demise. Consistently facing westward toward the setting sun across various regions and eras, Celtic graves insinuate that the departed were presumed to travel along celestial pathways into otherworldly domains. The Vix burial site in Burgundy epitomizes this orientation, while introducing intricacy through its location on elevated terrain, providing expansive territorial vistas. The positioning implies that individuals of high status were anticipated to uphold protective supervision over their earthly realms even beyond death. The idea of metempsychosis, or the migration of souls among various forms of life, is recurrent in classical accounts, detailing Celtic beliefs and is supported by archaeological findings from ceremonial sites across Celtic domains. Caesar's description of Druidic teachings on the immortality of souls and their journey after death to new bodies showcases sophisticated theological ideas that blend individual survival with cosmic cycles of death and rebirth. The intentional deposition of weapon caches at sites like Gun-sur-Aronde, where numerous artifacts were ceremonially destroyed before burial, implies rituals aimed at transferring objects from the material realm to otherworldly dimensions where they could fulfill new functions. The deliberate destruction of valuable objects prior to their deposition in sacred settings reflects beliefs in metamorphosis needed for material possessions to operate in supernatural realms. In Latin, near Lake Natal, extensive deposits of weapons, tools, and adornments exhibit consistent signs of intentional damage, rendering them useless in the earthly realm, but possibly priming them for service in the otherworldly plane. The meticulous destruction techniques, including distinct bending and breaking methods applied to various object categories, point to established procedures necessitating specialized knowledge for proper execution. Animal sacrifice customs observed across Celtic lands offer further insights into beliefs concerning soul migration and existence beyond this world. At sites like Gy-sur-Aronde, the methodical dismemberment practices reveal a careful separation of anatomical components based on specific ritual guidelines. Distinctions were made in the treatment of skulls versus postcranial remains, while certain bones were arranged in symbolic patterns that might convey theological ideas about the interconnectedness of physical and spiritual realms. The handling of human remains at Celtic ceremonial sites provides direct evidence of beliefs regarding soul endurance and the requirements for an otherworldly journey. At Rivemont-sur-Ancre, a large burial mound containing more than 1,000 individuals arranged in structured anatomical groupings illustrates systematic convictions concerning the afterlife that mandated meticulous treatment of physical remains. The segregation of skulls from other skeletal remains and their placement in distinct areas implies beliefs about various facets of human identity that necessitated separate treatment to ensure a successful transition to the afterlife. The spatial delineation of otherworldly realms within Celtic cosmology illustrates a nuanced comprehension of spatial connections linking earthly regions to supernatural domains via specific landscape characteristics and seasonal transitions. The Welsh concept of Anon and the Irish Tirog mirror traditions that delineate otherworldly realms existing in intricate interplay with the physical world, rather than in stark opposition. These realms were accessible through specific geographic sites and under particular temporal conditions, demanding specialized knowledge to navigate them safely. The recognition of thin places, or areas where the boundary between worlds thins, established a sacred geography intertwining access points to the other world with territorial arrangement and seasonal rituals. Archaeological findings from locations such as Newgrange in Ireland reveal how passage tombs were strategically oriented to capture specific celestial occurrences marking periods of heightened, otherworldly accessibility. The alignment of the winter solstice at Newgrange, where sunlight enters the burial chamber only on the shortest days of the year, indicates a deliberate coordination between celestial observations and beliefs concerning communication with the otherworld. Sacred springs dispersed across Celtic lands acted as pivotal interfaces connecting the earthly with the otherworldly, providing spaces for human interaction with supernatural entities and for offerings intended for otherworldly recipients. The healing springs at Bath, devoted to the goddess Sulis, attracted pilgrims seeking restoration through direct engagement with otherworldly forces accessible via the naturally warm waters. The multitude of cursed tablets found in the spring showcase a sophisticated grasp of legal procedures functioning across worldly boundaries, empowering human entreaties for otherworldly involvement in earthly disputes. The cyclical Celtic seasonal festivals structured the religious calendar, creating temporal, thin places where otherworldly beings could easily interact with human communities. Samhain, signifying the shift from the light to the dark half of the year, marked a significant temporal boundary when departed spirits could visit their former homes and supernatural entities could roam freely among human territories. Archaeological findings from Celtic settlements indicate heightened ritual activities during late October and early November, including special culinary preparations and the kindling of ceremonial fires that may have guided otherworldly visitors. The polytheistic nature of Celtic belief encompassed a multitude of deities, varying from universal cosmic forces to localized territorial spirits. This theological intricacy demanded thorough organization by religious experts who upheld the knowledge of proper invocations, seasonal rites, and territorial divisions defining different divine realms. The presence of consistent divine names in geographically distant Celtic areas suggests successful transmission of theological understanding facilitated by networks of skilled practitioners coordinating religious observances across tribal borders. Cernunnos, the horned god depicted on the Gundestrup cauldron and various Celtic relics, stands out as one of the most renowned deities in the Celtic pantheon. His depictions consistently link him with wildlife, predominantly stags, and symbols of prosperity such as cornucopias and grain sacks. Unearthed representations of Cernunnos from Scotland to Romania showcase the wide geographical reach of his veneration, highlighting regional variances reflecting adaptations of universal divine concepts. The discovery of the Gundestrup cauldron in a Danish peat bog, unmistakably of Celtic origin, offers profound insights into the intricate iconography tied to Cernunnos worship. The deity is depicted in a seated meditation pose, holding a torque in one hand and a ram-headed serpent in the other, encircled by diverse animals such as stags, boars, and bulls. This iconography alludes to the idea of divine dominion over the natural world, necessitating human intermediaries to uphold harmonious relationships between human societies and untamed animal populations. Diverse regional depictions of Cernunnos imagery exemplify the adaptation of universal divine concepts to local geographical and cultural circumstances. In the context of Britain, the deity is often linked with currency and symbols of material wealth, mirroring the economic interests of communities involved in extensive trade networks. Conversely, continental representations more prominently emphasize Cernunnos' association with wooded landscapes and untamed animal communities, indicating an adjustment to various ecological settings and means of subsistence. Bridge is another key Celtic deity with a widespread following across the Celtic realm, consistently linked with craftsmanship, healing practices, and poetic inspiration. Evidence from archaeology illustrates the veneration of Bridge through specialized workshops, healing centers, and educational institutions potentially dedicated to her patronage. The triple aspect of the goddess, embodying skills in metalworking, healing arts, and poetry, mirrors the amalgamation of practical expertise with mystical inspiration characteristic of Celtic traditions in specialized knowledge. The sanctuary devoted to Bridge at Kildare in Ireland presents significant proof of the structured establishments associated with prominent Celtic deities. Historical accounts describe a perpetual flame tended by a group of religious experts who safeguarded ancient ceremonial customs throughout the era of Christianity. Archaeological exploration of the site has unveiled traces of ongoing religious practices spanning more than 1,000 years, featuring metalworking facilities, healing springs, and educational edifices that supported communities of specialized practitioners. Metalworking sites across Celtic territories consistently exhibit connections with religious rituals, underscoring the divine encouragement of artisanal endeavors, demanding distinct expertise and supernatural ingenuity. The sophisticated, latent artistic style seen in Celtic metalwork exemplifies an advanced grasp of geometric principles, symbolic systems, and technical procedures that required extensive training to master. The consistent presence of artistic motifs across vast geographical distances suggests oversight by religious specialists who uphold standards for sacred art production. Lugh, the versatile deity linked to craftsmanship, warfare, and kingship, is found in various forms across Celtic lands, embodying his role as the patron of specialized knowledge and political authority. Celebrated on August 1st, the festival of Lugnasad marks the start of the harvest season with ceremonies blending agricultural thanksgiving, displays of craftsmanship, and athletic competitions. Archaeological findings from hilltop sites across Celtic Europe show heightened activity in late summer, hinting at Lugnasad celebrations that likely required coordination by religious specialists. A bronze tablet unearthed in France from the 1st century BC unveils a sophisticated lunar-solar calendar system that harmonizes lunar months with the solar year through advanced intercalation techniques. Regional deities in Celtic territories exemplify the localized aspect of much Celtic religious practice, showcasing how universal divine concepts were adapted to specific geographical and cultural settings. The goddess Awana, tied to the source of the Seine River, lured pilgrims from Gaul seeking healing through contact with her sacred waters. The votive offerings unearthed at her sanctuary display methodical approaches to divine supplication that necessitated understanding of appropriate types of offerings, ceremonial processes, and seasonal timing for various types of requests. Deities tied to Pacific landscapes, rivers, and tribal borders demanded specialized familiarity with local customs, genealogical ties, and historical traditions, endorsing divine jurisdiction over specific regions. The amalgamation of these local customs with wider Celtic theological frameworks necessitated careful organization by religious experts to ensure harmony between overarching principles and regional nuances in divine reverence. The sacred calendar that governed Celtic religious practices demonstrates intricate fusion of astronomical observations with agricultural cycles and theological ideologies regarding seasonal shifts across different cosmic states. The four principal festivals, Samhain, Imbolc, Beltane, and Lugnasad, divided the year into quarters correlating with pivotal transitions in both agricultural and pastoral pursuits. These festivities entailed extensive preparation, such as dedicated food production, readiness of ceremonial tools, and orchestration of communal involvement, tasks that could only be overseen by trained specialists. Samhain, observed on October 31st and November 1st, marked the most significant juncture in the Celtic calendar, when the boundary between worlds became most permeable and the deceased were believed to revisit their earthly abodes. Archaeological findings from Celtic settlements exhibit heightened ritual endeavors during this period, encompassing the elaboration of specialized meals, the kindling of ceremonial bonfires, and the conduct of divination rituals aimed at soliciting supernatural insight for the forthcoming dark season. The astronomical alignments uncovered. At Celtic ritual sites, systematic observations of celestial phenomena enabled precise timing of seasonal festivals, coordination of religious practices among geographically dispersed communities. Across Britain and Ireland, stone circles display consistent alignments with key solar and lunar events such as solstices, equinoxes, and significant lunar standstills occurring every 18.6 years. These precise alignments were the result of generations of meticulous observation and mathematical calculations, overseen by dedicated specialists. The festival of Imbolc, observed on February 1st and 2nd, marked the start of the agricultural year with rituals focused on purification, rejuvenation, and readiness for spring planting. Imbolc's connection to Brigid highlights her patronage of specialized fields like metalworking, healing, and agricultural innovations. Archaeological findings from Celtic settlements indicate heightened activity in early February, possibly linked to preparations for Imbolc that necessitated collaboration between agricultural and religious experts. Beltane, celebrated on April 30th and May 1st, symbolized the shift towards the brighter half of the year, with ceremonies centered on fertility, protection, and the renewal of pacts between human societies and other worldly beings. The tradition of lighting ceremonial fires on hilltops across Celtic territories facilitated communication networks that synchronized festival observations across vast regions. These fire rites demanded expertise in selecting appropriate fuels, ignition methods, and celestial timing, tasks entrusted solely to trained religious practitioners. Lugnasad, honored on August 1st, merged harvest gratitude with showcases of skill, sportsmanship, and legal proceedings necessitating coordination among various types of specialists. The festival's association with Lu underlines his patronage of fields demanding specialized knowledge and political leadership. Archaeological findings from elevated sites across Celtic Europe reveal temporary dwellings, artisanal workspaces, and communal areas utilized for gatherings during the end of summer. The lunar foundations of Celtic calendrical systems necessitated advanced mathematical acumen to synchronize monthly cycles with seasonal festivities and agricultural practices. The colony calendar illustrates a skilled mastery of intercalation techniques that enabled the alignment of lunar months with the solar year over extended durations. The intricate nature of these computations called for institutional knowledge passed down over generations of trained experts who upheld precision through meticulous observation and mathematical calculations. The reverberating cadence of bronze-tipped spears striking against wooden shields resonated through the hillsides of Gaul as Celtic societies readied themselves for Samhain, the paramount festival in their sacred calendar. Excavations at Oppida sites across Europe have unveiled extensive proof of the intricate arrangements necessary for these seasonal revelries, including specialized culinary facilities, provisional lodging structures for guests, and carefully curated placements of ceremonial artifacts that would be ritually sacrificed during the festivities. The execution of these grand communal events demanded sophisticated organizational efficiencies that only trained religious specialists, knowledgeable in both logistical coordination and spiritual requisites of seasonal ceremonies, could provide. The quartet of key festivals that structured the Celtic year, Samhain, Imbolc, Belen, and Lugnasad, signified much more than mere agricultural milestones or religious practices. These celebrations served as vital mechanisms for social unity, economic transactions, and political negotiations that brought together communities from diverse tribal domains. The timing of these festivals, determined through meticulous celestial observations, necessitated collaboration among various specialist categories, encompassing astronomers tasked with calculating optimal dates, legal experts overseeing contractual arrangements, and religious figures ensuring adherence to proper ceremonial procedures. During the transition from October to November, the observance of Samhain heralded the onset of the darker half of the year, a time when the boundary between the realms of the living and the dead thinned most notably. Archaeological findings from Celtic communities manifest considerable spikes in ceremonial practices during this period, including the culling of livestock for winter sustenance, the crafting of ritualistic libations, and the preparation of special provisions intended to fortify communities through the impending cold season. At the Danbury Hill Fort in Hampshire, traces of elaborate Samhain preparations are unearthed, such as large-scale grain processing, the erection of temporary storage structures, and the orchestration of grand communal banquets capable of hosting hundreds of attendees. The logistical facets of Samhain festivities demanded meticulous planning over months, spearheaded by specialists well-versed in agricultural cycles and religious dictates. Cattle and sheep designated for the winter slaughter had to be meticulously chosen based on specific parameters that harmonized nutritional necessity with ceremonial significance. Animals earmarked for ceremonial oblation bore distinct physical traits and ancestral pedigrees that rendered them suitable for divine consecration. Analysis of animal skeletal remains from Celtic sites discloses deliberate selection criteria indicative of a profound understanding of livestock breeding practices and religious protocols guiding sacrificial rites. The concoction of ceremonial libations for Samhain revelries entailed intricate fermentation techniques, necessitating exact timing and specialized apparatus. Excavations at the Hawkdorf burial ground unveiled bronze vessels harboring remnants of fermented honeyed beverages. Comparable vessels from sites throughout Celtic Europe attest to a spectrum of alcoholic concoctions spanning barley-based beers, fruit wines, and botanical-infused spirits. Generating these libations in quantities befitting major celebrations entailed close collaboration between agricultural specialists, cultivating essential ingredients, and brewing connoisseurs adept in fermentation chemistry and seasonal scheduling. The divination rituals at the core of Samhain practices necessitated meticulous readiness of specialized tools and thorough training of participants in accurate interpretation methods. Unearthing divination tool sets from Celtic sites has revealed assortments of inscribed bones, intricately carved wooden lots, and specified bronze tools crafted for particular fortune-telling procedures. A divination set unearthed in a 1st century BC burial in Colchester encompassed more than 30 distinct elements, such as dice-like items etched with diverse symbols, miniature bronze figurines representing various types of supernatural entities, and vessels devised for the ceremonial casting of lots. Deciphering the divination outcomes called for profound understanding of symbolic systems, mythological allusions, and legal precedents that could solely be obtained through prolonged specialized instruction. The uniformity of divination symbols across geographically separated Celtic sites implies standardized educational programs that disseminated interpretive wisdom via networks of trained experts. Bondis found at sites ranging from Scotland to Spain exhibit identical marking patterns and manufacturing methods, signifying coordinated fabrication by artisans adhering to established religious guidelines. Imbolc, honored at the onset of February, emphasized purifying rituals and readiness for the upcoming agricultural season, necessitating collaboration between religious experts and agricultural communities. The celebrations link to Bridge, the deity associated with smithcraft, healing, and poetry, mirrors the amalgamation of practical expertise with otherworldly inspiration that characterized Celtic traditions of specialized knowledge. Archaeological findings from sites devoted to Bridge veneration divulge workshops, healing establishments, and learning hubs that sustained communities of adherents, upholding her ceremonial customs. Imbolc's pivotal purification rites entail sanctifying agricultural equipment, livestock, and human participants through immersion in specially prepared waters and sacred fires. The holy springs in Bath and other therapeutic sites exhibit heightened activity in early February, marked by faint traces of votive gifts and the enactment of healing ceremonies blending conventional medicine with supernatural elements. The creation of purification waters necessitated expertise in specific herbs, minerals, and ceremonial practices, knowledge that was exclusive to trained specialists versed in botanical attributes and religious customs. By blessing agricultural tools during Imbolc observances, individuals sought divine safeguarding for the upcoming planting season, while also seizing opportunities for teaching improved farming techniques. Unearthed artifacts of Iron Age farming equipment indicate ritual adaptations, such as the integration of protective symbols, blessed metals, and ceremonial treatments aimed at enhancing their efficacy. The successful execution of these blessing rites relied on collaboration between religious experts attuned to divine expectations and craftsmen proficient in the construction and upkeep of tools. The festival of Beltane, heralded at the start of May, signified the shift to the brighter half of the year through rituals that underscored fertility, safeguarding, and the renewal of pacts between human societies and supernatural forces. Illuminating ceremonial fires atop hills throughout Celtic regions established visual communication networks that synchronized festival observances across expansive territories. Exploration of Beltane fire sites in archaeological contexts has unveiled meticulously arranged hearths, strategically positioned for maximum visibility, along with tailored fuel preparations and methodical stone configurations, likely serving astronomical alignment purposes. Initiating Beltane revelries through firelighting demanded precise timing, aligned with astronomical augury, and meticulous preparation of ceremonial artifacts. Prior to the commencement of festivities, all existing community fires were extinguished, ensuring that the new Beltane fire became the solitary source of flame for relighting household hearths and ceremonial torches. This protocol necessitated coordination by religious experts well versed in the practicalities of fire management and the spiritual import of flame rekindling ceremonies. The selection and preparation of Beltane fire fuel required specialized knowledge of wood properties, burning characteristics, and symbolic associations to determine the suitability of different tree species for ceremonial use. Oak wood, revered by Celtic deities and valued for its prolonged burning properties, served as the primary fuel for significant ceremonial fires. Hawthorn branches, collected in accordance with specific protocols and blessed through appropriate rituals, provided kindling with distinct protective qualities. Systematic gathering and preparation of these resources necessitated collaboration between botanical experts skilled in tree identification and religious specialists knowledgeable in proper harvesting rites. Lughnasadh, celebrated at the onset of August, blended harvest gratitude with showcases of craftsmanship, athletic contests, and judicial proceedings, uniting experts from various sectors of Celtic society. The festival's connection to Lugh, the versatile deity associated with craftsmanship and kingship, epitomizes the merging of practical skills with divine inspiration that defined Celtic notions of specialized expertise. Surveying archaeological findings from hilltop assembly sites across Europe unveils temporary structures, craft workshops, and contest arenas that facilitated large congregations during late summer. The craft exhibition central to Lughnasadh festivities offered specialists a platform to exhibit their proficiencies, exchange technical knowledge, and vie for recognition within their professional circles. Metalworkers exhibited their finest weaponry, tools, and ornaments to showcase mastery of intricate manufacturing methods. Textile artisans presented intricately woven fabrics that demonstrated expertise in dyeing techniques, pattern design, and decorative applications. These demonstrations served dual purposes of education and competition, fostering the sharing of technical know-how while establishing skill hierarchies within specialized crafts. The sports competitions associated with Lughnasadh required meticulous organization by experts who comprehended both the practical necessities of various contests and their symbolic importance within Celtic culture. Horse racing events necessitated expertise in breeding techniques, training methods, and track construction, knowledge that only equestrian specialists could offer. Wrestling and boxing matches called for referees well versed in traditional rules and scoring systems. Chariot racing, the most esteemed of Celtic sports, entailed intricate technical understanding of vehicle construction, horse management, and racing tactics that epitomized Celtic athletic accomplishment. The legal proceedings held during Lughnasadh assemblies presented opportunities for conflict resolution, contract discussions, and legal adjustments, tasks that needed coordination by legal specialists familiar with traditional precedents and current requirements. The transitory nature of these legal sessions required portable systems for record-keeping and memory techniques to ensure precise preservation of decisions and agreements. Archaeological findings of legal instruments from Celtic sites include measuring tools, scales for weighing precious metals, and symbolic items employed in oath-taking rituals. The topic of human sacrifice in Celtic religious observances remains a contentious aspect of Druidic practices, with classical accounts offering vivid narratives that must be scrutinized against archaeological evidence and scholarly analysis. Caesar's depictions of widespread human sacrifice, such as the construction of colossal wicker figures filled with living victims, represent among the most sensational allegations about Celtic religious customs. Nonetheless, these narratives should be evaluated in the context of Roman political propaganda and cultural biases, which frequently depicted non-Roman peoples as adherents of barbaric traditions, justifying military actions. Evidence of human sacrifice in Celtic contexts, documented by archaeological findings, does exist, yet the extent and organized nature as depicted by classical sources are greatly exaggerated. The discovery of bog bodies scattered throughout northern Europe provides conclusive proof of ritual human sacrifices within Celtic religious customs. However, these sporadic findings only partially substantiate assertions of widespread systematic mass sacrifices. For instance, the Lindo man unearthed in a Cheshire bog dating back to the 1st century AD displays signs of ritualistic killing, such as a garland around the neck, cranial blunt trauma, and a slit throat indicative of ceremonial execution executed in accordance with specific guidelines. Through forensics on bog bodies, it is revealed that intricate methods of ritual killings were performed with precision and expertise, necessitating specialized knowledge for accurate execution. On a similar note, the Groel man, discovered in Denmark and dating back to the 3rd century BC, exhibited evidence of meticulous preparation, incorporating ritualistic grooming and consumption of particular foods before demise. Remaining stomach contents preserved in peat bogs unveiled last meals comprising grains, seeds, and herbs, possibly imbued with ritualistic significance. These findings indicate that instances of human sacrifice adhered to established protocols, demanding training and religious authority for faithful implementation. Interpretations of archaeological findings surrounding human sacrifices should explore alternative hypotheses like legal executions, casualties of warfare, or accidental deaths that could yield similar physical findings. The clustering of bog body discoveries within Celtic settlements hints at cultural rituals involving deliberate submergence of human remains in aquatic surroundings. Nonetheless, discerning specific circumstances of individual deaths solely from archaeological remnants remains challenging. The ceremonial treatment of certain bog bodies, inclusive of deliberate rearrangement of remains and incorporation of personal effects, implies purposeful rather than mundane disposal of corpses. Divination practices were integral to Celtic religious rituals, necessitating rigorous training and keen observational skills for symbolic interpretation and communication with supernatural forces. Celtic diviners utilized diverse methods to seek supernatural guidance, including observing natural occurrences, interpreting animal actions, and casting specialized lots or dice. Discoveries of divination tools at Celtic sites in archaeological excavations reflect a high level of understanding of symbolic systems, probability, and ritual procedures that facilitated structured fortune-telling practices. Augury, a prestigious form of Celtic divination, focused on interpreting bird behavior and flight patterns, requiring in-depth knowledge of bird species, migration patterns, and behavioral cues conveying supernatural messages. Becoming a proficient practitioner of Celtic bird divination, known as Orionixry, demanded years of field experience, memorization of interpretive traditions, and comprehension of symbolic relationships between various bird species and types of divine communication. The consistency in divinatory interpretations across Celtic regions suggests standardized educational programs that disseminated this specialized knowledge through networks of trained diviners. Celtic ornithomancy entailed methodical observation techniques involving meticulous attention to factors such as flight directions, flock formations, vocalizations, and unusual behaviors indicating supernatural intervention. Establishing observation points within significant locations in sacred landscapes allowed diviners to conduct their rituals under optimal conditions while adhering to proper ceremonial protocols. Examination of hilltop sites across Celtic Europe has unveiled circular stone arrangements that possibly served as platforms for augural observations, strategically positioned for enhanced visibility of celestial phenomena. Scrying, which involves divination, through observing reflective surfaces such as water, polished metal, and crystal formations, necessitated specialized equipment and carefully controlled environmental conditions that allowed practitioners to access supernatural visions. Discoveries of scrying tools at Celtic sites have included polished bronze discs, mirrors with silver backs, and naturally occurring crystal formations that were adapted for divinatory purposes. Preparing and maintaining scrying equipment demanded technical expertise in metallurgy, optics, and surface treatments that were only attainable through specialized training. Interpreting scrying visions required profound knowledge of symbolic systems, mythological references, and individual psychology to translate vague visual impressions into coherent prophetic messages. Training for proficient scrying practice involved meditation practices, memory enhancement exercises, and systematic exploration of interpretive frameworks that offered a foundation for understanding supernatural communications. The uniformity of scrying symbolism across Celtic regions indicates coordinated educational systems that disseminated interpretive knowledge through established institutional networks. Healing practices within Celtic society integrated herbal medicine, surgical techniques, and spiritual interventions through sophisticated theoretical constructs that combined empirical observations with supernatural influences. Celtic healers possessed comprehensive medical knowledge encompassing detailed understanding of human anatomy, plant pharmacology, and therapeutic procedures that facilitated effective treatment of various ailments. Archaeological findings from healing centers across Celtic Europe unveil the institutional infrastructures that supported medical practices, including specialized facilities, equipment storage areas, and educational initiatives for training aspiring healers. The herbal medicine traditions upheld by Celtic healers entailed a vast botanical understanding involving plant identification, optimal harvesting practices, preparation techniques, and therapeutic applications that necessitated years of dedicated study to master completely. The Druids' recognized expertise in medicine, as documented by classical authors, demonstrates systematic approaches to pharmaceutical knowledge that merged practical experience with theoretical comprehension of plant properties and human physiology. Archaeological findings at Celtic sites reveal a sophisticated understanding of pharmacological principles among the inhabitants, enabling the effective treatment of various medical conditions through the use of medicinal plants. Celtic medical practitioners possessed advanced surgical capabilities, demonstrated through procedures for treating battle wounds, setting broken bones, and conducting intricate operations that required detailed anatomical knowledge and technical expertise. Analysis of skeletal remains from Celtic sites provides evidence of successful surgical interventions such as trepanation procedures, bone setting, and wound treatment, enabling patients to recover from severe injuries. Unearthed tools at Celtic medical sites, including bronze scalpels, bone needles, and specialized instruments for various surgical procedures, showcase an advanced grasp of medical technology. The combination of spiritual practices with practical medical care mirrors Celtic beliefs regarding the causes of diseases, which encompassed both physical and supernatural factors, necessitating integrated therapeutic approaches. Healing sanctuaries dedicated to deities like Sulis and Sawana served as locations where medical treatment could be intertwined with religious ceremonies aimed at addressing supernatural elements of illnesses. Votive offerings found at these sites, such as anatomical depictions of healed body parts, illustrate the systematic merging of divine intervention with practical medical attention. Therapeutic procedures conducted at Celtic healing sanctuaries involved ritual purification, herbal treatments, and ceremonial practices that targeted both physical symptoms and spiritual origins of illnesses. The preparation of therapeutic waters at sacred springs required expertise in mineral properties, herbal additions, and ceremonial protocols to enhance the healing properties of natural resources. The seamless coordination of these therapeutic activities called for collaboration between medical specialists well versed in practical treatment methods and religious practitioners knowledgeable in maintaining the appropriate spiritual observances during healing rituals. The gradual dismantling of Druidic institutions did not commence with dramatic measures. Roman governors, recognizing the strategic importance of dismantling the religious networks underpinning Celtic resistance, undertook calculated administrative measures to curb Druidic activities in Gaul under Tiberius's reign from 14 to 37 AD. These measures aimed to neutralize the threat posed by the Druids' organizational prowess, which spanned tribal boundaries and challenged Roman authority by offering alternative systems of law and justice. By restricting Druidic judicial functions and prohibiting large religious gatherings that could double as platforms for political opposition, Roman officials sought to quash parallel structures of authority that undermined imperial administration. The restrictions specifically targeted key sites where Celtic representatives traditionally assembled to coordinate religious policies and resolve intertribal conflicts, essentially acting as clandestine political forums in the guise of religious affairs. As the prohibitions took hold, archaeological findings indicate a shift in material culture in elite Celtic circles towards Roman influences, with traditional Celtic coinage bearing indigenous symbols giving way to Roman-style issues emphasizing imperial power and religious motifs. Excavations further reveal a decline in traditional Celtic religious practices during the Tiberian era, manifesting in reduced votive offerings and the abandonment of long-standing sacred sites. Economic pressures resulting from the religious clampdown incentivized Celtic elites to adopt Roman customs over their traditional beliefs. Ambitious individuals seeking advancement within the Roman imperial system were drawn to lucrative opportunities presented by collaboration with Roman administration. To demonstrate loyalty to Roman values and distance themselves from indigenous traditions, many embraced Roman burial practices, such as cremation over inhumation, as reflected in elite Celtic burials of the era. The inclusion of Roman luxury goods rather than traditional Celtic prestige items further exemplified this shift. Around 54 AD, Emperor Claudius's formal prohibition of Druidism marked a significant turning point in Roman suppression efforts. This edict escalated administrative restrictions into full-fledged religious persecution, supported by military enforcement. Specifically targeting Druidism as a perceived barbaric superstition incompatible with Roman civilization, this decree authorized the arrest and execution of individuals associated with the practice. The timing of Claudius's anti-Druidism stance coincided with his British campaigns, indicating a coordinated strategy to eradicate Druidic influence in both conquered Gaul and targeted future territories. The edict established legal procedures for identifying and prosecuting Druidic practitioners, incentivizing informants to report such individuals in exchange for rewards or settling personal grievances. Roman authorities developed investigative methods to uncover Druidic activity, scrutinizing suspects' knowledge of traditional Celtic lore, proficiency in astronomical calculations, and ability to recount lengthy oral traditions. These measures effectively criminalized the possession of traditional Celtic intellectual knowledge, placing educated individuals in the challenging position of choosing between preserving their cultural heritage and safeguarding their own well-being. The enforcement of Claudius's mandate signaled a deliberate effort to consolidate Roman authority and suppress perceived threats to imperial interests. Extensive cooperation between Roman military forces and local collaborators was necessary to enforce laws against Druidic practices. In the 50s AD, archaeological findings from GIC settlements revealed an increased Roman military presence at locations previously linked to Celtic religious customs. This included the construction of Roman-style fortifications near traditional sacred sites and the establishment of military outposts to control access to key pilgrimage routes. These security measures effectively disrupted the communication and coordination networks that had allowed Druidic institutions to exert influence across different tribes. The Roman persecution of Druidism stemmed not only from religious intolerance, but also from strategic concerns related to imperial security and administrative efficiency. Roman governors understood that Druidic institutions could serve as alternative sources of authority that challenged imperial control, especially during periods of political turmoil or military vulnerability. The ability of Druids to organize resistance activities across tribal boundaries posed significant threats during succession crises or border conflicts when Roman military capabilities were limited. The systematic removal of potential opposition leaders was viewed as a wise imperial policy rather than an act of religious extremism. Roman administrators were particularly concerned about the intelligence networks maintained by Druidic institutions, which made it challenging for them to monitor communications between geographically distant Celtic communities. The traditional Druidic assemblies and educational exchanges provided opportunities for the exchange of sensitive political information, including details about Roman military movements, administrative strategies, and vulnerabilities that hostile forces could exploit. The interruption of these communication networks due to religious persecution achieved significant military goals, justifying the allocation of resources towards anti-Druidic campaigns. Suetonius Paulinus's appointment as governor of Britain in 58 AD brought to the province a commander specifically chosen for his expertise in counterinsurgency operations and his readiness to employ severe tactics against civilian populations suspected of backing resistance efforts. Having previously operated in Mauritania, Paulus had devised strategies for combating guerrilla warfare in rugged terrains and had exhibited his proficiency in orchestrating intricate military maneuvers across challenging geographical obstacles. His assignment to the British command underscored the imperial acknowledgement that the subjugation of the island necessitated the eradication of Druidic strongholds functioning as hubs of organized opposition to Roman authority. The strategic planning for the assault on Mona commenced with extensive intelligence collection operations that identified the island's defensive capabilities, population levels, and religious significance within the broader British Druidic network. Roman agents working undercover in Celtic communities furnished detailed intelligence on the island's fortifications, the number of available defenders, and the seasonal dynamics of religious activities that could impact the scheduling of military operations. This intelligence unearthed that Mona functioned not only as a religious center, but also as an organized military command center, where resistance leaders from various parts of Britain convened to strategize anti-Roman activities. Preparations for the logistics of the Mona campaign necessitated inventive solutions to the intricate challenges of amphibious warfare in hazardous tidal waters, where conventional Roman naval strategies proved insufficient. The Menai Strait posed formidable hindrances due to strong currents, shifting sandbanks and tidal ranges that could potentially strand vessels or hinder synchronized landings. To navigate these hurdles, Roman engineers devised specialized shallow draft vessels capable of maneuvering through these waters while carrying adequate troops and equipment to establish beachheads against steadfast opposition. The fabrication of these vessels entailed months of groundwork utilizing resources and craftsmen sourced from different regions of the Roman Empire. Intelligence reports on Mona's defenses unearthed sophisticated fortification systems that melded natural geographical advantages with constructed barriers structured to guide attacking forces into predefined kill zones. The island's defenders had erected wooden palisades along the shoreline, stationed artillery engines strategically, and set up obstacles in the shallow waters to obstruct Roman landing craft. The defensive preparations showcased military engineering prowess indicative of coordination led by seasoned commanders well-versed in Roman tactical methods and siege warfare techniques. The Roman campaign at Mona in 60 AD unfurled as a meticulously planned endeavor, merging naval landings with psychological tactics aimed at dispelling the superstitious dread Celtic defenders sought to instill in their foes. In Tacitus's narrative, he recounts the initial Roman hesitance upon encountering the unearthly spectacle of white-robed Druids invoking divine curses while women, clad in mourning attire, traversed among the defenders, brandishing torches and chanting incantations. This psychological aspect of the conflict mirrored deliberate Celtic stratagems aimed at leveraging Roman fears and religious insecurities that could potentially sow hesitation among attacking forces in critical junctures. The turning point in Roman morale materialized when Suetonius personally spurred his troops to cast aside their apprehensions and press forward against what he deemed as theatrical performances meant to mask military vulnerabilities rather than authentic supernatural capabilities. Subsequent Roman advancement proved devastating against defenders who had predominantly relied on psychological warfare rather than traditional military strategies. The Romans' superior training, gear, and tactical synchronization proved overpowering against Celtic opposition. Despite the defenders' intimate familiarity with the local terrain and their fervent determination to safeguard their holiest religious sites, the methodical obliteration following the Roman triumph at Mona epitomized calculated cultural warfare, aimed at eradicating the foundational pillars of British Druidic resistance. Roman forces dismantled the sacred groves where generations of Druids had carried out their most significant ceremonies, obliterated the altars dedicated to sacrificial rituals, and incinerated the libraries of wooden tablets holding the accumulated knowledge of Celtic intellectual tradition. The archaeological findings from Anglesey exhibit evidence of extensive fires during this era, with layers of ash and charcoal documenting the obliteration of wooden structures and organic materials linked to religious practices. The unearthing of human remains at Druidic sites on Mona provided Roman leaders with propaganda material to justify their severe actions against Celtic religious establishments. Tacitus specifically references altars drenched in human blood and groves where victims were hanged, crafting narratives that reinforced Roman assertions regarding the savage practices of the Druids. Nevertheless, the archaeological proof of human sacrifice at these sites remains scarce and inconclusive, hinting that Roman records might have exaggerated the extent and systematic nature of such rituals to legitimize their wholesale eradication of Celtic religious organizations. The timing of the Mona assault proved disastrous for Roman dominance in eastern Britain, as Boudicca's rebellion erupted while Suetonius's troops were preoccupied with dismantling Druidic strongholds on the remote island. The alignment of these events was not accidental, but rather a result of meticulous planning by Celtic resistance figures who understood that Roman military might could not simultaneously quell rebellions in various regions. The Druidic networks orchestrating this strategic synchronization showcased their sustained efficacy despite enduring years of Roman oppression, underscoring their capability to uphold communications across vast geographic distances. Beda's revolt laid bare the extent to which juridic institutions successfully organized unified resistance against Roman governance throughout Britain. The uprising commenced within the second following the Roman confiscation of tribal territories and the harsh treatment of the royal family. It swiftly propagated to other tribes who had been primed for synchronized action through Druidic communication and organizational networks. The rebels' capacity to orchestrate simultaneous assaults on Roman settlements throughout eastern Britain showcased sophisticated planning abilities that likely stemmed from seasoned military and political advisors. Boudica's rebellion contained religious aspects, with a specific focus on targeting Roman religious sites and symbols influenced by Druidic strategic goals. The rebels methodically demolished Roman temples, vandalized imperial statues, and performed rituals that subverted Roman religious customs through intentional sacrilege aimed at highlighting the weakness of Roman gods. These actions transcended mere military objectives to encompass religious warfare, aiming to erode Roman spiritual authority alongside their political and military dominance. The slaughter of Roman civilians at Camulodunum, Londinium, and Verulamium included ritualistic elements reflecting Druidic beliefs, inappropriate sacrifices to Celtic deities offended by Roman presence. Archaeological findings from these locations reveal organized destruction following distinct patterns, such as targeting specific types of structures, arranging human remains according to ceremonial procedures, and placing Roman artifacts in manners indicating ritualistic intent rather than random violence. These patterns suggest that the rebellion's violence was guided by religious experts acquainted with the proper means of appeasing Celtic gods by vanquishing their adversaries. Boudica's rebellion ultimately faltered, partly due to the rebels' incapacity to sustain coordinated tactics as Roman forces regrouped from Mona and directed their focus on quelling the uprising. The downfall of Druidic leadership on Anglesey had removed vital coordination capabilities that could have bolstered more effective resistance against Roman counterattacks. The fragmented Celtic forces post their initial triumphs indicated the absence of structural frameworks that had previously facilitated synchronized military strategies across tribal boundaries. The triumph of the Romans over Padica's troops at the Battle of Watling Street showcased the military supremacy of disciplined professional soldiers over tribal warriors, notwithstanding the rebels' numerical superiority and fervent determination. The strategic synchronization exhibited by Roman forces commanded by Suetonius starkly contrasted with the individualistic combat style of Celtic fighters, who lacked the training and organizational foundations necessary for prolonged military campaigns against professional armies. This military setback effectively brought an end to organized Celtic opposition to Roman dominion in southern Britain, and eradicated the political backdrop that allowed Druidic institutions to operate effectively. The gradual adoption of Roman customs by Celtic elites post the quelling of major resistance movements created social and economic incentives to abandon traditional religious practices in favor of Roman alternatives, which provided access to imperial privileges and safeguarded against ongoing persecution. The establishment of Roman-style villas, the assimilation of Roman educational systems, and the embrace of Roman religious cults paved the way for social progress by necessitating a demonstration of allegiance to imperial values and a renouncement of indigenous traditions. Archaeological findings from esteemed Celtic sites in the latter part of the 1st century AD reveal significant shifts in material culture that mirror this cultural metamorphosis. The economic advantages of collaborating with Roman governance enticed ambitious individuals who acknowledged that traditional Celtic social frameworks offered meager avenues for growth in comparison to the meritocratic components of imperial systems. The Roman stress on education, legal proficiency, and administrative aptitude opened up alternative pathways to social status that were not reliant on conventional aristocratic lineages or religious authority. Young Celts who previously may have sought Druidic training now increasingly turned to Roman education, which offered practical advantages amidst the changing political and economic landscape. The urban hubs established by Roman governance gave rise to new social settings where traditional Celtic religious customs became marginalized and disconnected from everyday life. Roman priorities in constructing public infrastructure, fostering commercial activities, and managing administrative affairs cultivated social environments that favored Roman cultural norms over native traditions. Evidence from archaeological findings in Roman British settlements indicates scant traces of traditional Celtic religious rituals, suggesting that the process of urbanization itself catalyzed a cultural shift that eroded the social platform supporting Druidic institutions. Through legal reforms enforced by Roman officials, traditional Celtic legal structures were systematically replaced by Roman legal protocols that provided enhanced consistency, written documentation, and appeal mechanisms preferred by many over the oral traditions of Celtic law. Roman principles emphasizing individual rights, property safeguards, and commercial regulations laid the groundwork for economic growth that traditional Celtic legal systems had not adequately accommodated. The practical benefits of Roman legal practices prompted their adoption, gradually weakening the judicial authority that had been central to Druidic influence in Celtic society. Upon the arrival of Christian missionaries in Celtic territories during the 4th and 5th centuries AD, they did not encounter a void in belief systems resulting from Roman suppression. Instead, they encountered resilient networks of native spiritual practitioners who had adapted their traditions to endure systematic oppression. In Ireland, untouched by Roman conquest, Druidic institutions persevered, remained mostly undisturbed, serving as a unique setting to observe the interaction between Celtic religious customs and the emerging Christian faith. Beginning circa 432 AD, the evangelistic efforts led by individuals such as St. Patrick highlighted the advanced theological and intellectual prowess of Irish Druids, who engaged in intricate discussions regarding cosmology, morality, and divine sovereignty, showcasing their enduring significance as a scholarly group. Discoveries from archaeological excavations at 5th century Irish settlements indicate a gradual shift in the nature of traditional Celtic religious sites rather than their abandonment. Notably, at Tara, the historic centre of Irish monarchy, findings have revealed Christian burials intermingled with earlier pagan interments, implying a period of religious cohabitation instead of immediate displacement. The renowned Lear File, or Stone of Destiny, continued to be utilized in royal coronation rituals, blending Christian blessings with the traditional Celtic notions of sacred kingship. The establishment of early Christian churches at locations formerly linked with Druidic practices reflects a purposeful strategy of accommodation rather than conflict with existing religious beliefs. The conversion methodologies implemented by early Christian missionaries displayed a nuanced comprehension of Celtic religious psychology and societal structure. Instead of mandating the abrupt cessation of all traditional customs, missionary saints such as Columba and Brigid established Christian communities that integrated familiar aspects of Celtic spirituality while gradually introducing novel theological ideas. The monastic schools they established adopted teaching techniques mirroring Druidic educational systems, emphasizing memorization, oral transmission of knowledge, and the fusion of practical skills with spiritual guidance. This educational continuity facilitated the preservation of Celtic intellectual heritage within Christian institutional frameworks. The Bridge of Kildare exemplifies the intricate process of religious transformation that characterized early medieval Ireland. Historical analysis suggests that the Christian saint may have been built upon the foundation of the Celtic goddess Bridge, whose associations with smithcraft, healing, and poetry seamlessly transferred to her Christian counterpart. The monastery at Kildare maintained an eternal flame that directly paralleled pre-Christian Celtic fire worship. The saint's patronage of metalwork and textile production continued ancient associations between divine inspiration and skilled craftsmanship. Archaeological investigation of the Kildare site has revealed evidence of continuous religious activities spanning the transition from pagan to Christian worship, including metalwork facilities and craft production areas that maintain traditional Celtic technological practices. The preservation of Celtic mythological narratives within Christian scriptural contexts demonstrates the sophisticated strategies employed by converted Druids to maintain their cultural heritage while adapting to new religious requirements. The Book of Invasions, compiled by Christian scribes but preserving ancient Celtic origin myths, reveals how traditional genealogies connecting human rulers to divine ancestors were reinterpreted within biblical frameworks that traced Celtic peoples back to Noah's descendants. This genealogical reconstruction required extensive knowledge of both Celtic oral traditions and Christian scriptural scholarship, indicating collaboration between former Druidic specialists and Christian clerics who shared common interests in preserving historical knowledge. The legal texts preserved in early medieval Irish manuscripts reveal the gradual integration of Celtic customary law with Christian canonical requirements through processes of selective adaptation rather than wholesale replacement. The Breen laws compiled during the 7th and 8th centuries maintained distinctly Celtic legal concepts, including complex systems of honour prices, kinship obligations, and territorial rights that had been central to pre-Christian social organisation. The modification of traditional elements to align with Christian ethical principles concerning marriage, property rights, and judicial procedures is evident in these texts. The preservation of technical legal vocabulary in these writings serves as a testament to the continued existence of specialized Druidic knowledge within Christian institutional settings. Celtic scholars housed in Christian monasteries maintained astronomical knowledge that facilitated the creation of intricate calendar systems. These systems harmonized Christian liturgical demands with customary Celtic seasonal observances. Texts generated in Irish monasteries during the 7th and 8th centuries exhibit mathematical prowess that must have been passed down through generations from pre-Christian experts in astronomy. The clash over the dating of Easter, which spurred a division between Celtic and Roman Christian communities, was not solely theological but also rooted in disparate systems of astronomical calculation. These systems harbored different methods of celestial observation and mathematical computation. Founded by St. Comgall in the 6th century, Bangor Monastery emerged as a prominent hub for astronomical research, attracting scholars from throughout Europe in pursuit of Celtic computational knowledge. The late 7th century antiphonary of Bangor contains astronomical tables and mathematical treatises illustrating the fusion of traditional Celtic astronomical wisdom with Christian chronological standards. The accuracy and alignment of these calculations with independent astronomical observations suggest that Irish monasteries had effectively conserved and enhanced the scientific traditions integral to Druidic education. Early Christian Irish texts that preserve botanical knowledge highlight the continuity of traditional Celtic herbal medicine within novel institutional environments that prioritize divine healing in conjunction with natural remedies. Medical treatises found in manuscripts like the Book of Lismore exhibit a sophisticated grasp of plant pharmacology, surgical techniques, and healing practices that clearly trace back to pre-Christian Celtic medical customs. The practical treatments were integrated into Christian theological frameworks that attributed healing powers to divine intervention, operating through natural means rather than the mystical properties of plants and procedures. St. Kevin established the Irish monastery of Glendale in the 6th century, which developed botanical gardens to meet medical needs and educate Christian healers in traditional Celtic therapeutic practices. Archaeological investigations of the monastery site uncovered evidence of systematic cultivation of medicinal plants, specialized preparation facilities, and storage areas for herbal remedies. By blending traditional Celtic botanical knowledge with Christian healing methods, sophisticated medical traditions were preserved through the transition to Christianity. The reconfiguration of Celtic sacred landscapes under Christian influence involved strategically siting churches, monasteries, and sacred locations at areas once linked to pre-Christian religious practices. This practice, known as interpretestia Christiana, conserved traditional sacred spaces while refocusing their spiritual significance towards Christian ideals. Surveys of early medieval Irish religious sites revealed consistent Christian constructions at sites previously associated with stone circles, burial mounds, and other pre-Christian rituals, The continuity in the use of sacred spaces indicates a deliberate strategy of accommodation rather than conflict with existing religious landscapes. The abundance of holy wells in Ireland and Wales illustrates the successful blending of Celtic water worship customs with Christian devotional practices. These sites often feature natural springs linked to specific saints whose legendary deeds often parallel the roles of pre-Christian Celtic deities. Archaeological research into holy wells has unearthed evidence indicating consistent religious usage spanning the shift from paganism to Christianity. This evidence includes votive offerings, pilgrimage practices, and healing ceremonies that exhibit distinct Celtic traits despite being situated within Christian contexts. The observed ritual procedures at these locations, such as directional circuits, specific prayers, and seasonal festivities, maintain ancient Celtic ceremonial structures adapted to align with Christian theological principles. The Welsh monastery of Llantwit Major, established by St Illtyd in the latter part of the 5th century, emerged as a pivotal hub for the preservation and dissemination of Celtic scholarly customs within Christian learning settings. The educational institution founded at Llantwit attracted students from various regions of Britain and Ireland who sought instruction in both Christian theology and traditional Celtic scholarly disciplines like law, medicine, astronomy, and poetry. The curriculum devised at Llantwit fused Christian scripture studies with conventional Celtic educational methodologies, thus facilitating the safeguarding of native intellectual traditions within novel institutional frameworks. The scholarly endeavours at Llantwit Major gave rise to significant early medieval Welsh texts that conserve Celtic historical and legal practices within Christian literary milieus. During the 10th century, the compilation of Welsh law codes heavily drew on traditional Celtic legal concepts that were preserved and advanced within Christian monastic schools. The technical legal terminology and procedural specifics found in these documents illustrate the successful transfer of specialized Druidic knowledge through Christian educational institutions, which upheld a connection with pre-Christian intellectual traditions. The rise of Celtic Christianity in Scotland exhibited similar trends of adaptation and transformation that enabled the conservation of native religious and intellectual customs within Christian organizational structures. Established by St Columba in 563 AD, the monastery of Iona emerged as a significant hub for merging Celtic and Christian cultural aspects, influencing religious progression across Scotland and northern England. The artistic accomplishments of Iona, encompassing illuminated manuscripts and stone sculptures, showcase the fusion of Celtic artistic heritage with Christian iconographic requisites, yielding unique hybrid cultural forms. The creation of the Book of Kells at Iona and other related Celtic monastic centres in the 8th and 9th centuries epitomizes the sophisticated blending of Celtic artistic traditions with Christian theological themes. The elaborate interlacing patterns, stylized animal depictions, and geometric motifs that adorn the manuscript originate directly from pre-Christian Celtic artistic customs while serving Christian devotional aims. The high level of skill necessary to craft such intricate artwork likely persisted through continuous teaching from pre-Christian Celtic artisans who adjusted their expertise to meet Christian demands. The missionary endeavours of Celtic monks in Europe during the 6th, 7th, and 8th centuries disseminated unique intellectual and spiritual practices stemming from Celtic and Christian amalgamations. Influential figures such as St Columba, who established monastic communities in Gaul and northern Italy, introduced educational techniques, artistic styles, and theological viewpoints that upheld Celtic intellectual heritage within the broader framework of European Christian society. Works transcribed at these Celtic monasteries underscored the global impact of educational models, harmonizing pre-Christian Celtic knowledge with Christian theological studies. The persistence of Celtic languages during the medieval era played a pivotal role in safeguarding ancient cultural customs against potential erosion during the Christian conversion. Irish, Welsh, and Scottish Gaelic languages retained substantial lexicons pertaining to traditional legal systems, medicine, astronomy, and religious beliefs, nurturing ancestral wisdom from the pre-Christian era. Technical terminology found in medieval Celtic writings showcased the perpetuation of intellectual legacies necessitating specialized training for comprehension and application. The retention of this specialized vocabulary within Christian literary frameworks facilitated the transmission of Celtic wisdom across the transition to Christianity. Legal doctrines preserved in medieval Celtic manuscripts depicted well-defined legal frameworks embodying distinct Celtic attributes while conforming to Christian ethical precepts. The Welsh legal codes of Hywel Dde, assembled in the 10th century, conserved legal principles and procedural guidelines rooted in pre-Christian Celtic customary law, juxtaposed with Christian ideologies concerning marital unions, property ownership, and judicial governance. The meticulous nature of these legal documents and their harmonization with earlier Celtic legal conventions indicated the perpetuation of specialized legal expertise throughout the conversion epoch. The medical knowledge documented in medieval Celtic manuscripts showcases the effective fusion of traditional Celtic healing methods with Christian theological perspectives that stress divine intervention in the healing process. Manuscripts such as Liber Flavus Fergusum, containing Irish medical practices, reveal a sophisticated grasp of anatomy, pharmacology, and surgical techniques rooted in pre-Christian Celtic medicinal customs. These practical treatments were now interpreted within Christian frameworks, attributing healing success to divine grace operating through natural means, rather than relying on inherent magical qualities of the treatments. Astronomical knowledge preserved in Celtic monasteries made significant contributions to medieval European science by upholding and enhancing computational techniques originating from pre-Christian Celtic intellectual traditions. The Easter dispute between Celtic and Roman Christianity reflected conflicting astronomical calculation systems stemming from diverse approaches to celestial observation and mathematical computation. Resolving these disputes demanded advanced astronomical knowledge, illustrating the enduring vitality of Celtic scientific traditions within Christian institutional settings. The transition of Druids into Christian hermits, scholars, and advisors in medieval literature illuminates the intricate process by which Celtic intellectual customs adjusted to Christian cultural demands. Merlin in Arthurian romance embodies this evolution, blending traditional Celtic magical wisdom with Christian moral guidance to offer ancient insights within medieval Christian cultural settings. The literary portrayals of such characters underscore the enduring allure of Celtic intellectual traditions and their successful assimilation into Christian narrative frameworks. The legendary figure of the historical Merlin, upon whom later traditions surrounding Arthurian Merlin were built, exemplifies how Celtic learned experts adapted to Christian cultural predominance while upholding their traditional roles as advisors to political leaders. Welsh writings depict Merlin as both a bard and a prophet who served under different kings while retaining knowledge of traditional Celtic wisdom encompassing prophecy, natural philosophy, and historical memory. His legendary descent into madness and seclusion in the wilderness mirror the psychological and societal strains encountered by Celtic intellectuals during the shift to Christianity. The paradox of preserving Celtic cultural heritage through medieval literature is intriguing. Despite the systematic suppression of historical Druidism by Roman domination and its evolution under Christian influence, medieval writers began crafting increasingly intricate and idealized portrayals of these ancient personalities that bore little resemblance to their authentic historical identities. This literary evolution mainly unfolded through Welsh and Irish manuscript traditions which, despite purporting to safeguard ancient wisdom, actually reflected the cultural apprehensions and intellectual focal points of medieval Christian society, more than genuine pre-Christian Celtic religious customs. The Mabinogion, assembled from earlier oral narratives in the 11th and 12th centuries, presents Druids as enigmatic figures possessing supernatural wisdom and magical prowess, surpassing anything detailed in classical texts or substantiated by archaeological findings. The Mabinogi's 4 branches feature characters like Math, Fab, and Matuni, depicted as adept enchanters capable of turning humans into animals and creating living beings from flowers and plants. These literary depictions highlight magical metamorphosis and supernatural manipulation of natural elements rather than the historical Druidic roles of legal arbitration, education, and religious rites recorded in earlier sources. The evolution of Druidic characters in Welsh medieval texts showcases a deliberate broadening of their perceived capabilities to encompass abilities not traditionally associated with historical Druids by classical authors. For instance, the character of Gwydion in the 4th branch of the Mabinogi exemplifies skills such as shape-shifting, illusion crafting, and animating inanimate objects, drawing upon medieval European folklore rather than authentic Celtic religious rites. Despite elaborate descriptions of magical practices in literary sources, archaeological findings from Celtic sites fail to support the existence of material culture linked to such practices, hinting that medieval writers were likely embellishing mythical figures rather than faithfully recording historical customs. Throughout Welsh tales, Druidic figures are consistently depicted as operating beyond societal norms, possessing wisdom that transcends human comprehension. Similarly, the portrayal of Manawydan in the 3rd branch showcases supernatural powers like cursing entire kingdoms, summoning phantom armies, and manipulating agricultural fertility through mystical means, diverging significantly from the documented functions of historical Druids in classical texts. These literary reinterpretations seem more aligned with medieval Christian views of supernatural authority rather than genuine pre-Christian Celtic spiritualities. In the Irish manuscript tradition, romanticized depictions of Druids as prophets and counselors to legendary monarchs emerge, emphasizing magical abilities surpassing historical precedents. For instance, the altar cycle from the 8th to 12th centuries presents Druids as pivotal figures in epic tales capable of prophesying future events, controlling weather phenomena, and influencing battle outcomes through supernatural interventions. Notably, the character of Cathbad, advisor to King Conchobar mac Nessa, exemplifies prophetic insight and mystical powers in this narrative context. The abilities of Cathbad in the Tinbo Quang include the foresight of tragic outcomes resulting from various actions, coupled with a magical prowess enabling the manipulation of natural processes. The narrative portrays Cathbad's druidic capabilities evolving beyond their traditional scope, showcasing divination skills that can precisely predict forthcoming events. An instance in the text involves Cath foreseeing the unfortunate destiny awaiting warrior Q-Chain should he take up arms on a specific day. These prophetic powers adhere to medieval literary conventions depicting wise counselors diverging from historical Celtic religious practices. Depictions of Druids in Irish literature illustrate an expansion of educational roles, surpassing the 20-year training period noted by Caesar to encompass teachings in mystical arts absent in documented Celtic religious traditions. Fintan MacBacra, depicted as enduring multiple epochs and possessing comprehensive knowledge of Irish history from Genesis to the present, signifies a literary embellishment transforming Druidic educational functions into supernatural omniscience. These literary advancements mirror medieval Christian notions of divine insight rather than genuine Celtic scholarly customs. An emblematic instance of this transformation is found in Geoffrey of Monmouth's Historiam Britannia, circa 1136, which notably transforms Celtic scholarly figures. The fabrication of Merlin as the quintessential wizard advisor surpasses historical Druids in supernatural aptitude. Geoffrey Merlin amalgamates Welsh folklore surrounding the prophet Myrddin with allusions to Celtic spiritual specialists in a narrative that imbues the character with magical powers that align more closely with medieval European notions of supernatural prowess rather than traditional Celtic religious customs. Through a systematic portrayal in the narrative, Geoffrey illustrates the medieval inclination to reimagine historical Celtic figures as fantastical entities tailored to suit contemporary literary preferences. Notably, his depiction of Merlin's prophetic gifts encompasses intricate prophecies concerning future English monarchs and political events, underscoring the author's utilization of Celtic mythological figures to legitimize prevailing political structures rather than uphold genuine historical traditions. The prophetic content intertwined within the Historiam Britanniae comprises elaborate symbolic forecasts that address 12th century political preoccupations rather than authentic Celtic prophetic practices. Geoffrey's intentional alignment of these prophecies with Norman political concerns underscores his deliberate construction of pseudo-historical authority rather than the preservation of authentic Celtic cultural heritage. The narrative also attributes extraordinary magical feats to Merlin, such as the relocation of monumental stone structures from Ireland to England, shape-shifting for deceptive purposes, and the control of natural elements to achieve military objectives. These superhuman abilities surpass known accounts of historical Druids, classical texts, and archaeological findings, indicating Geoffrey's creation of a whimsical character in line with medieval literary conventions rather than the preservation of genuine Celtic lore. The specific magical practices described in the text draw upon medieval European folklore surrounding sorcerers and magicians, diverging from substantiated Celtic religious practices. The architectural accomplishments linked to Merlin in Geoffrey's narrative, such as the erection of Stonehenge using supernatural means, exemplify the medieval inclination to attribute ancient edifices to magical acts, rather than acknowledging the advanced engineering prowess of prehistoric civilizations. Geoffrey's portrayal of Merlin moving the giant's ring from Mount Killer in Ireland to Salisbury Plain through supernatural levitation reflects the medieval incapacity to grasp the genuine construction methods utilized by Neolithic builders. This literary interpretation of Stonehenge's creation gained widespread acceptance across medieval Europe, despite lacking any historical basis. The political roles ascribed to Merlin in Arthurian literature demonstrate a systematic expansion of traditional Druidic advisory functions to include direct influence over royal succession and the supernatural endorsement of political authority. Geoffrey's depiction of Merlin orchestrating Arthur's conception through magical deception of Igraine illustrates the evolution of ancient Celtic notions of sacred kingship into medieval fantastical narratives. The intricate supernatural mechanisms described in these tales bear no resemblance to established Celtic royal rituals or beliefs in divine kingship found in historical records. The evolution of Arthurian romance during the 12th and 13th centuries further developed Merlin as the quintessential sagacious counselor whose supernatural insights enabled him to guide Arthur's reign while anticipating its tragic end. French romances like Christian Droy and Roberto de Bon portray Merlin as possessing omniscient knowledge of past, present, and future events, with the ability to manipulate natural and supernatural forces to achieve desired outcomes. The literary advancements observed in medieval Europe depict ideal royal advisors rather than authentic Celtic intellectual or religious traditions. Within Arthurian literature, magical artifacts linked to Merlin, such as Excalibur and the Round Table, showcase a deliberate introduction of supernatural elements not grounded in known Celtic cultural or religious practices. Archaeological findings at Celtic sites exhibit advanced metalworking skills and ceremonial items, yet lack evidence of the fantastical weapons and furniture depicted in medieval Romance texts. The unique supernatural characteristics ascribed to these artifacts align more closely with medieval European folklore than with traditional Celtic religious concepts surrounding sacred objects. In medieval literature, the instructional rapport between Merlin and Arthur reshapes historical Druidic teachings into supernatural guidance encompassing magical arts, prophetic interpretation, and manipulation of otherworldly forces. Merlin's purported educational structure surpasses documented Druidic practices, blending elements of medieval European magical traditions absent from Celtic cultural history. Irish manuscripts like the Acalumna Senurac feature Druids as pivotal figures in the Fianna cycle, where their supernatural talents equip them to advise, heal, and practice magic for the warrior cohorts under Finn Macumhale's leadership. Finn himself is portrayed as possessing Druidic wisdom, enabling him to attain unearthly insight through rituals and communicate with beings from other realms. The literary depictions systematically broaden historical Druidic roles to encompass magical powers influenced by medieval Irish folklore rather than documented pre-Christian religious customs. The persistence of Breen law in medieval Irish legal manuscripts demonstrates a genuine link with pre-Christian Celtic legal practices while exhibiting the gradual evolution of these systems under Christian influence. Legal processes outlined in works such as the Sentius Emma retain distinct Celtic traits, such as intricate honor price systems, kin-based legal obligations, and territorial rights rooted in pre-Christian customary law. However, the integration of Christian moral principles and the organized structure of legal texts reflect medieval scholarly approaches rather than authentic pre-Christian Celtic legal traditions. The technical legal terminology preserved in Breen law texts indicates the survival of specialized Celtic legal knowledge during the conversion era, showcasing significant adaptations to align with Christian theological standards. The precise definitions of legal terms and structured legal procedures highlight sophisticated intellectual traditions that required extensive training for full comprehension. The uniformity of legal terminology across various manuscript traditions suggests the successful preservation of genuine Celtic legal concepts despite their incorporation into Christian cultural contexts. The medical wisdom conserved in medieval Irish writings like the Liber Flava Fergusiorum exhibits a genuine link with pre-Christian Celtic healing practices while showing a methodical merging with medieval European medical theories. Herbal remedies and surgical techniques detailed in these texts maintain distinct Celtic features encompassing specific plant preparations, therapeutic uses, and treatment guidelines derived from pre-Christian healing customs. Nonetheless, the theoretical frameworks used to elucidate disease causation and treatment effectiveness reflect medieval Christian beliefs in divine intervention rather than authentic Celtic medical philosophy. The astronomical knowledge preserved in Irish monasteries during the medieval era facilitated substantial contributions to European computational science by upholding and advancing calendar systems originating from pre-Christian Celtic intellectual heritage. The computational manuscripts generated at institutions such as Bangor and Clonmacnoise manifest mathematical proficiency that necessitated continuous transmission from pre-Christian astronomical experts. The accuracy of these computations, harmonized with Christian liturgical needs, demonstrates the successful incorporation of Celtic scientific wisdom into the intellectual landscape of medieval Europe. The mythological narratives conserved in medieval Irish literature retain genuine Celtic storytelling frameworks and themes, showcasing methodical expansion indicative of medieval literary norms rather than mere preservation of pre-Christian beliefs. These mythological sagas, exemplified by works like Lebor Gabála, present intricate origin tales that fuse Celtic mythology with biblical timelines through intricate genealogical reconstructions. Such literary synthesis demanded a deep understanding of both Celtic oral traditions and Christian exegetical traditions, illustrating collaboration between former Druidic practitioners and Christian clergy. The progressive development of Druidic capacities in medieval literature engendered fantasy personas bearing little resemblance to their historical antecedents, yet serving contemporary literary and political objectives. The impact of these idealized portrayals on subsequent European literature and popular culture underscores the capacity of medieval literary creativity to reconfigure historical narratives in accordance with contemporary cultural requirements and aesthetic sensibilities. The scholarly methodologies employed by medieval Celtic writers reflect a blend of traditional wisdom and innovative literary expression. Writers who compiled and organized traditional materials demonstrated sophisticated approaches to cultural preservation, striking a balance between authentic historical elements and contemporary literary needs. Their systematic organization of legal texts, compilation of mythological narratives, and preservation of technical vocabulary showcased intellectual capabilities that maintained a connection with pre-Christian Celtic scholarly traditions while adapting to medieval European academic standards. These scholarly accomplishments facilitated the preservation of a wealth of authentic Celtic cultural material within literary contexts that made ancient traditions accessible to medieval Christian audiences. The 18th century marked a remarkable shift in European attitudes towards ancient Celtic culture, driven by Enlightenment ideals that lauded natural wisdom over classical authority and primitive virtue over civilized corruption. This intellectual revolution found a prominent advocate in William Stoutley, whose antiquarian investigations at Stonehenge and Avery between 1719 and 1724 profoundly reshaped European understanding of prehistoric Britain and laid the groundwork for modern Druidic revival movements. Stoutley's meticulous field surveys utilized innovative measurement techniques and systematic documentation methods, representing significant advancements in archaeological methodology. However, his interpretations were influenced more by contemporary philosophical interests than by empirical analysis of the carefully recorded evidence. Stoutley's restoration of Stonehenge as a temple for the British Druids portrayed the monument as a surviving vestige of an advanced ancient religion embodying natural philosophical principles that surpassed both classical paganism and contemporary Christianity. While his detailed architectural analysis provided valuable insights into the construction phases and astronomical alignments of the monument, attributing the entire complex to Druidic builders was more a product of wishful thinking than archaeological evidence. Stukely's chronological framework mistakenly placed Stonehenge's construction during the period of documented Druidic activity in Britain, disregarding the monument's actual Neolithic origins by over 2 millennia. This fundamental chronological error had far-reaching implications. Embedded in the collective consciousness and still impacting public perceptions of Druidism is a monument with compelling archaeological evidence pointing to its much earlier construction. Stukel's Druidic theories were grounded in a philosophical framework that heavily drew from contemporary DS theology. This theology aimed to find evidence of a natural religion untouched by institutional dogma or classical teachings. Stukely depicted the ancient Druids as monotheistic thinkers who revered a supreme deity through the observation of natural phenomena and celestial cycles. He portrayed them as proto-Christians who attained religious truths through reason rather than divine revelation. This narrative met the intellectual demands of the time by offering an ancient basis for enlightened religious philosophy and asserting Britain's noble prehistoric heritage on par with or surpassing classical antiquity. Stoutley's explorations at Avery uncovered a sprawling prehistoric ritual landscape, which he interpreted as signs of a sophisticated Druidic religious system spanning vast regions. Through his identification of the West Kennet Avenue, linking the stone circle to other monuments, he demonstrated remarkable archaeological acumen that foreshadowed modern landscape archaeology by centuries. Despite this, Stoutley's overarching interpretation of the entire site as a colossal serpent temple dedicated to Druidic worship, relied more on symbolic reasoning than on empirical examination of archaeological findings. The intricate mythological framework he constructed to elucidate Avery's design and purpose wove a captivating narrative that shaped antiquarian thinking from the 18th to the 19th centuries. Stoutley's legacy extended well beyond academic circles to influence wider cultural movements seeking alternatives to established religious and political powers. By presenting ancient British Druids as wise lawmakers and natural philosophers, he armed political reformers with arguments that Britain's ancient laws embodied ideals of freedom and justice, tarnished over time by Norman conquest and religious tyranny. The idealized depiction of Druidic society as during the golden age of natural democracy and religious tolerance, these concepts were strategically utilized to serve contemporary political objectives, while concurrently laying the mythological groundwork for the emerging British national identity. Renowned Welsh scholar and forger Elo Morgan Daly took Stuccia's idealization of ancient Druidism to extraordinary levels by methodically producing medieval manuscripts that falsely purported to safeguard genuine ancient Welsh traditions. Between 1789 and his passing in 1826, Elo crafted a multitude of forged documents, such as detailed genealogies, Druidic rituals, and philosophical writings, all claiming to transmit authentic Celtic wisdom derived from an unbroken oral tradition. The intricate nature of these forgeries, composed in archaic Welsh and interwoven with legitimate historical components, managed to dupe scholars for over a century, fundamentally shaping present-day comprehension of Welsh cultural heritage and Celtic spirituality. One of Elo's most impactful fabrications was the establishment in 1792 of the Gorsid of the Bards of the Isle of Britain, an allegedly ancient institution created to preserve authentic Druidic customs through a continuous lineage of Welsh poets and intellectuals. Elo's elaborate ceremonies devised for the Gorsid amalgamated genuine elements of Welsh poetic tradition with invented rituals fashioned from his broad familiarity with classical texts, medieval literature, and contemporary Masonic customs. The stone circles erected by Elo for Gorsid ceremonies at various locations across Wales established new sacred sites that emanated an ancient aura while truly reflecting 18th century romantic interpretations of prehistoric religious practices. Underpinning Elo's concocted Druidism was a philosophical structure echoing Enlightenment ideals of natural religion, democratic governance, and universal human rights, projected backward onto ancient Celtic society. His falsified texts portrayed Druids as monotheistic philosophers, advocating for the immortality of the soul, the unity of all mankind, and the supremacy of individual conscience over institutional authority. The teachings of this era cater to modern Unitarian and radical political movements, concurrently bolstering Wales's cultural heritage in defiance of English assertions to classical lineage and Scottish Highland Romanticism. The institutional framework established for the revival of Druidism featured intricate hierarchies of BIC degrees, initiation rites, and educational programs purportedly safeguarding ancient Celtic wisdom, yet in reality echoing 18th century educational principles and Masonic organizational methodologies. The Gorsids' focus on competitive poetry, scholarly accomplishments, and moral guidance resonated with genuine Welsh scholars who unknowingly fostered the institution's advancement, oblivious to its fictitious origins. By melding genuine Welsh cultural facets with fabricated customs, hybrid establishments emerged to fulfill authentic cultural requisites despite their deceitful historical backdrop. The Victorian period marked a surge in Celtic culture fascination, reshaping academic Celtic studies and giving rise to numerous groups pledging to conserve or rekindle ancient Druidic practices. Notably, Charlotte Guest's Mabinogi translation rendered Welsh medieval literature accessible to English audiences, while scholars like John Rhee and Kuno Ma solidified Celtic philology as a credible academic field. Discoveries in archaeology during the 19th century gradually unveiled the true intricacy and sophistication of prehistoric Celtic civilization, debunking romantic depictions of Druidic involvement in megalithic monument construction. The establishment of the ancient order of Druids in London in 1781 marked the earliest endeavour to formulate a contemporary association grounded in purported ancient Druidic tenets. Despite being predominantly shaped by Freemasonry rather than genuine Celtic customs, the order's focal points on mutual assistance, benevolent endeavours, and ethical guidance enticed middle-class adherents across Britain and its colonies, establishing social networks that fulfilled practical economic and political roles. The incorporation of ritualistic elements into ceremonial practices by various orders during the 19th century drew inspiration from classical sources and romantic literature rather than authentic Celtic religious traditions. These efforts aimed to stage theatrical performances that catered to contemporary yearnings for ancient wisdom and mystic knowledge. The rise in popularity of Druidic orders in Victorian society reflected a broader interest in alternative spirituality, ancient teachings and exotic religious customs as alternatives to mainstream Christianity. Established in 1833, the United Ancient Order of Druids devised complex systems of degrees and initiation rites purporting to pass down genuine Celtic wisdom, while essentially functioning as social clubs for urban professionals seeking companionship and purpose in the rapidly industrializing world. By donning elaborate costumes, using ceremonial tools, and setting up grand architectural displays, these organizations wowed audiences, fulfilling romantic desires for a link to ancient traditions while meeting contemporary social and economic demands. However, the landscape gradually changed with archaeological findings in the 19th and early 20th centuries, revolutionizing scholarly understanding of prehistoric European civilizations and debunking many romantic notions surrounding ancient Druidism. Discoveries such as Swiss lake villages unveiling advanced Bronze Age settlements predating historical Celtic culture, and investigations into megalithic monuments across Europe revealing their Neolithic origins, millennia prior to recognizable Celtic civilization, paved the way for a new perspective. The advent of scientific dating methods, notably radiocarbon dating post-1950, firmly established chronological frameworks that dismantled romantic theories associating Druids with Stonehenge, Avebury, and other prehistoric sites. Uncovering authentic Celtic archaeological sites throughout Europe shed light on the tangible material culture of Iron Age Celtic society, showcasing its refinement and distinguishing it from romanticized interpretations. Excavations at locations like Manching in Germany and Bibract in France unearthed proof of intricate urban communities, advanced metalworking techniques, and extensive trade networks, challenging the romantic portrayals of Druids as simple nature worshippers residing in forest groves. The methodic exploration of Celtic realms. Religious sites uncovered intricate ritual practices and architectural accomplishments that exceeded romantic expectations, diverging significantly from modern inventions. Deciphering ancient Celtic inscriptions across Europe offered direct insights into Celtic languages and religious concepts, facilitating scholarly reconstruction of authentic Celtic beliefs and rituals. The revelation of the colony calendar showcased advanced Celtic astronomical knowledge, while curse tablets from Bath and other locations shed light on the real concerns and religious customs of historical Celtic societies. These primary sources allowed scholars to differentiate genuine Celtic traditions from later embellishments in medieval literature and contemporary romanticized interpretations, laying the groundwork for a more genuine historical comprehension of Celtic civilization. The establishment of comparative Indo-European studies in the late 19th and early 20th centuries contextualized Celtic culture within wider linguistic and cultural frameworks, exposing its true historical connections and evolutionary trajectories. Pioneering works by scholars such as Julius Picorni and Calvert Watkins revealed the Indo-European roots of Celtic religious vocabulary and mythological ideas, highlighting the distinct innovations that defined Celtic cultural evolution. This scholarly paradigm facilitated a more precise understanding of the interplay between Celtic religion and other ancient European traditions, discrediting romantic notions of exclusive Celtic wisdom and spiritual supremacy. The rise of Celtic nationalism in the 19th and early 20th centuries provided political landscapes that fostered both scholarly exploration of authentic Celtic legacy and the fabrication of traditions tailored to contemporary identity requirements. The Irish cultural renaissance, spearheaded by figures like Douglas Hyde and Lady Gregory, blended scholarly examinations of medieval Irish literature with romantic interpretations that underscored Celtic spiritual eminence and cultural distinctiveness. In Wales, Scotland, and Brittany, movements emerged which crafted hybrid cultural identities, blending authentic historical elements with newly created traditions to bolster political autonomy and cultural distinctiveness. The 20th century witnessed the rise of Neo-Druidism as a distinct religious movement that recognized its contemporary origins while drawing inspiration from ancient Celtic customs. By 1909, the Druid order, revamped by George Watson MacGregor Reed, relinquished assertions of historical lineage to cultivate spiritual practices rooted in nature, influenced by romantic interpretations of Celtic beliefs and modern environmental concerns. This approach facilitated the establishment of meaningful spiritual customs, catering to contemporary needs without resorting to the historical fabrication prevalent in preceding revival movements. The impact of Wiccan and other neo-pagan movements on modern Druidism gave rise to syncretic religious practices, melding elements from diverse sources like Celtic mythology, classical paganism, and contemporary environmental spirituality. Gerald Gardner's Wiccan resurgence in the 1940s and 1950s set the stage for the creation of modern pagan faiths that claimed ancient roots while embracing contemporary origins. The interplay between Wiccan and Druidic revival movements spawned blended traditions emphasizing seasonal festivities, nature reverence, and goddess spirituality, drawing inspiration and validation from varied historical reservoirs. Contemporary Neo-Druidism encompasses a multitude of organizations and traditions, falling within a spectrum from scholarly historical reenactment to innovative spiritual practices inspired by Celtic themes. Established in 1964 by Ross Nichols, the Order of Bards, Ovates, and Druids crafted educational initiatives fusing historical Celtic scholarship with psychological and spiritual exercises tailored for present-day practitioners. The Endriocht Féin, founded by Isaac Bonewits in 1983, prioritizes scholarly precision and Indo-European comparative methodologies while developing practical religious customs suitable for modern adherents seeking Celtic-inspired spirituality. A clear distinction is drawn between historical authenticity and contemporary spiritual pursuit. Contemporary neo-Druidic movements place a growing importance on archaeological and historical research that reveals the intricate complexity and diversity of ancient Celtic civilization. Responsible neo-Druidic organizations recognize the limitations of historical knowledge, crafting meaningful spiritual traditions that pay homage to Celtic heritage without making unfounded claims of historical continuity or authentic preservation of ancient practices. This balanced approach supports spiritual growth while upholding intellectual integrity regarding the connections between ancient Celtic customs and modern religious innovations. Academic exploration of Celtic civilization progresses through fresh archaeological findings, enhanced analytical methods, and interdisciplinary strategies that blend material evidence with linguistic and comparative religious studies. Recent excavations at sites like Hunterberg in Germany and Coufran in France have brought to light previously undisclosed facets of Celtic urban development and religious rituals, showcasing the ongoing potential for new discoveries that enrich comprehension of Celtic civilization. The utilization of scientific methodologies such as DNA analysis, isotope studies, and environmental analysis offers increasingly precise insights into Celtic society, validating and challenging earlier scholarly interpretations. The influence of Druidism in contemporary society extends well beyond neo-Druidic religious movements, permeating literature, environmental activism, and popular culture in ways that echo an enduring fascination with Celtic wisdom and nature-based spirituality. Depictions of Druids in fantasy literature, films, and games often highlight their roles as sagacious advisors and formidable sorcerers, drawing from romanticized traditions popularized in the 18th and 19th centuries rather than historical reality. These representations in popular culture. Contemporary environmental activists draw inspiration from romanticized depictions of Druids as nature-loving philosophers, associating them with ecological harmony and reverence for the natural world. Scholars highlight historical Druids as learned professionals with expertise in law, religion, and intellectual pursuits such as astronomy, medicine, and natural philosophy within Iron Age Celtic society. The idealized image of Druids as primitive nature dwellers conflicts with archaeological evidence revealing a society of technological advancement, complex religious practices, and extensive trade connections. Despite the survival of remnants in medieval Celtic literature, the suppression of Druidic institutions by Roman conquest and Christian conversion impedes accurate historical reconstruction. The transformation of Druids into symbols of ancient wisdom and alternative authority meets broader cultural needs for identity and meaning, surpassing strict historical accuracy and persisting through the Romantic revival of Druidism in the 18th and 19th centuries. The enduring popularity of Druidic themes in literature, spirituality, and popular culture underscores their continued significance as symbols of humanity's bond with nature and ancient wisdom. While acknowledging the variability in historical accuracy, modern neo-Druidic movements represent innovative endeavors to cultivate meaningful spiritual practices that pay homage to Celtic heritage, all while steering clear of unsubstantiated historical assertions. The range of contemporary Druidic organizations demonstrates diverse strategies for blending historical influences with modern adaptations, encompassing meticulous reconstruction initiatives as well as imaginative spiritual movements that leverage Celtic motifs as foundations for modern religious exploration. This diversity caters to individuals with diverse preferences and requirements, offering avenues for embracing Celtic-inspired spirituality while upholding intellectual integrity concerning the interplay between ancient customs and present-day observances. The narrative of Druidism thus encapsulates both the historical significance of Celtic religious leaders who played pivotal roles in Iron Age European societies and the romantic reinterpretations that have elevated them as emblems of ancient wisdom and natural spirituality in contemporary society. Archaeological and historical findings reveal sophisticated intellectual practices that fulfilled legal, spiritual, and educational purposes in intricate Celtic communities. Although literature and modern culture have introduced mythological figures to meet current spiritual and cultural demands, an appreciation of both facets of the Druidic legacy allows for the recognition of authentic Celtic cultural accomplishments while acknowledging the transformative influence of romanticized imaginations in reshaping historical narratives to align with contemporary values and ambitions. The enduring allure of Druidism mirrors fundamental human desires for a connection with nature, ancient wisdom, and alternative sources of authority, transcending conventional institutional frameworks. Whether through rigorous historical scrutiny or innovative spiritual exploration, contemporary engagement with Druidic themes offers meaningful frameworks for examining the intricate relationship between human consciousness and natural surroundings. The enduring influence of the Druids, whether rooted in history or fantasy, continues to hold significance in modern society. They serve as a beacon of inspiration for individuals in search of perspectives beyond mechanistic ideologies and established religious hierarchies. This underscores the long-lasting impact of Celtic cultural icons in igniting human creativity and fostering spiritual growth throughout the ages.